What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable for an impromptu 900 subs party. Decided to have a little fun tonight. Gonna be busy. I got a bunch of stuff coming up and wanted to do this. Actually hit 900 subs the other night, but I thought it'd be fun to do this real quick and just celebrate and say thank you to all the folks who have subscribed to the channel, encouraged me over the last 8 months, and made this something fun for me to do. It's been great to engage with so many different people, different personality types, to gain new friends, acquaintances, enemies, and everything in between. Slam RN, thanks so much for swinging by to say congrats. Appreciate it. I actually interacted with you pretty early on in all of this. Same thing with SFT, Redefine Living, Doki Doki, what's up? How are you? In his image, everybody, thank you so much for coming in. Anybody that wants to join into the stream, feel free. Link is in the description. I also posted it in the description, and it's in the side chat. It's kind of it's kind of crazy. A lot of y'all heard me talk about this before, but so we're now coming up. This is the 8th month. So I started my channel. Kind of amazed that gotten this far this quickly, but I actually started this channel as a direct result of an interaction I had with Matt Dillahunty on the Atheist Experience, and my mind was blown that somebody as ignorant as him was being given such recognition and credibility and authority in the context of things such as our very existence, when it was rather clear from listening to him and then my direct interaction with him, they didn't actually have a clue about many of the fundamentals of what's required for our very existence, yet runs around telling everybody that says otherwise they don't know what they're talking about and they're living in some sort of fantasy land. About the same time, I had kind of come across modern day debate, and actually reached out to James about engaging in a debate, and lo and behold, he hit me up and said, "Hey, you want to take on RJ Downard?" Didn't know who the guy was at the time, but said, "Hey, why not?" Anyway, it was pretty interesting. I spent about a week watching a bunch of his previous debates and watching stuff from SFT and a variety of other people on the subject, and I'm like, man, this guy I don't think he's that much of a challenge. Like, this is kind of interesting. I'll be intrigued. And so then I think it was the night before or 2 days before, something like that, my first debate ever, at least in terms of the YouTube world, I created this channel. It was February 4th, I think. And then the rest is history. So then I went on to have my first YouTube debate with old RJ. It was rather interesting. It's kind of funny. I look back on it now, and it was weird getting ready to go into it. I had the first set of nerves I've had in a long time. So I've done professionally. I've spoken in front of 500, 600, 700 people. I had a radio show, done all those kind of things, and interviewed pretty high level people, venture capitalists, CEOs of major companies. I've stood before boards of publicly traded companies and done presentations, all this kind of stuff. And it was kind of interesting going into that one initially. During my opening statement, it actually felt like the first time I went live when I had my radio show. And I realized, like, I had all these people listening to me, the shortness of breath. It was weird. I was forcing myself to make it through, and I remembered it from that first day on my radio show when I'm like, man, I wonder if this is coming through to the audience. And I'm like about to be gasping for air a little bit. But we get into it, and before we know it, with my first debate with RJ, and I suddenly realized, like, okay, even though this guy's done a ton of debates, even though he's given all this credence by the atheist community, this dude's a joke. And it kind of culminated in that debate when I literally asked him if he believed that Google, YouTube, Snapchat, etc. could create themselves from scratch without an intelligent agent. And when he conceded that yes, that was totally possible, I knew that he was a joke. And that if this was the kind of position so many of these um, atheists are actually taking, they actually mean it, they actually think it. Um, wow, this will be entertainment. So I say all that for, yeah, I do have a ridiculous amount of fun doing this. Um, it's kind of amazing the growth of the interactions that I've had. As I said a minute ago, the relationships that have been formed. But as I say in my channel trailer, one of the things that really drives me to do all of this is the opportunity to share knowledge and to be quite honest, to still have the mental capacity to engage in these sorts of dialogues, the interactions, and um, trying to accomplish the objectives that I think have been put forth for so many of us. And I think for right now, I may just for those of you who haven't seen, I'm going to play my channel trailer. I'll kind of put things into context, and then I'll give y'all some more backstory into what actually happened in terms of what ultimately led to my major paradigm shift in my life, and how I ultimately ended up getting into all of this madness and undertook a pretty significant modification in what I was doing with myself. So let me see. Let me share this real quick.
Hey, what's up, YouTube? John Maddox coming at you with the introduction to my new channel, Logical, Plausible, Probable, where I attempt to break down the arguments being made by atheists, skeptics, agnostics, evolutionists, and everybody else in between as to why it is a more reasonable conclusion that God exists, we do not exist by chance, and that there is ultimate purpose beyond what we are being told by those who refuse to take any aspect of belief seriously, and also try to argue that you, if you believe so, are not a reasonable person. Please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share it with your friends. And I hope that I can help bring knowledge and insight and research that I've done over the years to your minds and to your eyes and to you across the world. The reason I'm doing this channel is about 7 years ago, I actually cheated death. I was running a pretty successful company and was living high on the hog. And then I found out that I was having a massive brain hemorrhage. I found this out on a Wednesday morning, and Friday morning I had emergency brain surgery. But it was a fascinating time in my life where I came to the realization that I was being held accountable for a promise that I had made God back my freshman year in college, which was that for 10 years I was going to go out, live this world up, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, make a bunch of money, and then I would get my life back in order. Well, guess what? It was almost 10 years to the day from when I had made that promise to when I found myself lying in ICU being told by doctors that I should not be alive. And there's a whole much more to that story, but the major piece of it is that I was left with my ability to reason, to think, to communicate, and I should not have those skills, and yet I do. And I decided that it was time to start using those talents that I was blessed with to help bring the truth to you. Please subscribe to my channel, share with your friends, like my videos, and never forget, everything we do here is all about being logical, plausible, and probable.
So anyway, that gives you a little modicum of the backstory. So that whole period of, man, it was crazy intense time in my life. But so I talk about like making a promise to God. I'm not kidding. So I grew up good family, had all the right upbringing, all that kind of fun stuff. And then when my stupid self went off to college, I fell in love, had my heart broken, all that kind of good stuff. This all happens like a 6 month period, my freshman year of college. And then I make this decision, like going into spring break. You know what? I've been a good kid all this time. It's time to just have some fun. So I go and let's say I started partying hardy. It was a good time. But I then consciously made this decision, like, you know what? Man, I've been doing all this Christian stuff for a long time. Let's go have some fun. And I literally made this promise to God, like, yeah, okay, for a decade, I'm gonna go make a bunch of money, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, I'm gonna do all this stuff, and then, I'll get my life right again. Well, I went out and was an entrepreneur and built my company and had business partners and employees and, did all this stuff. And, things were starting to look pretty darn good. And I was 28 years old, and company's doing a couple $1 million a year. We're going along, and anyway, I was literally sitting in my office with either was a billionaire or like just under a billionaire, something like that. He's extraordinarily wealthy man, and I was pitching him on funding this whole like business concept I had, and from a investment perspective. And anyway, I remember feeling a little funky, and then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm waking up in an ambulance, and like, what is going on here? Anyway, so I go to the emergency room, and they're checking me out, doing these tests and stuff, and everything seemed fine. Like I'm talking, my reflexes are fine, I'm coherent, all this kind of stuff, and they're like, well, we just think we don't know what's going on with you. Well, my girlfriend at the time convinced me that I should, go have some more tests, have a physical done, stuff like that. So, a couple weeks later, I have a physical and some different blood tests and stuff. Everything comes back golden. And my doctor is like, hey, why don't we have, some CAT scans done just to make sure that there's nothing major going on, like something wrong with your brain, that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay. So the following Wednesday, I have a brain scan done, and I'm driving back to my office, and where I had the scan done was like 4.5 blocks from my office in downtown Nashville. And I hadn't even made it back to the office, and they called me and they said, Mr. Maddox, where are you? I was like, I just left your office. What's going on? I'm heading back to mine. What's up? They said, oh, well, you're having a major brain hemorrhage. Like, what are you doing? So I'm driving. They're like, you're driving? I was like, yeah. Like, well, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel okay. But anyway, they say, well, if you're still capable, like, turn around right now, drive to St. Thomas. I was actually Baptist Hospital at the time, and they're waiting for you with the wheelchair. There'll be a wheelchair waiting for you at the front door. So I'm like, okay. So I turned around, drove myself to the hospital. I called my business partner at the time, and I'm like, hey, man, so Sean's supposed to be coming in to sign this contract. Here's the terms. Like, apparently I'm having a brain hemorrhage, so I'm going to the hospital. Just make sure you get that deal done. And, I'm sure I'll be fine. It's going to go, they're going to check me out or whatever. So I go and park my car, walk into the hospital. They're sure enough, they're waiting for me with a wheelchair. And next thing I know, I'm wired up in ICU and being told that you're having a major brain hemorrhage, we're gonna do some more tests, like et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So I don't tell my parents. I called my girlfriend and told her what's going on, but like, man, my parents were actually supposed to go to Boston because my niece, who had been diagnosed with a benign brain tumor, is supposed to be having brain surgery the following week. Anyway, so after that, I talked to more neurologists and such. They're telling me, we're gonna find out what's going on, and we're probably gonna have to do surgery and things like that. I'm like, okay, tomorrow morning we're gonna do this other type of test to see if we can figure out exactly where the hemorrhage is and such, see if it's something we can fix. And I'm like, okay. So I call my parents. I'm like, wait, Mom, so tomorrow I'm gonna have to be in the hospital. They're gonna do some tests, so just want to give you a heads up. I'll call you and let you know if you need to come on down. So I'm literally making this phone call from ICU, telling my mother that tomorrow I'm going to be having a major test done to see if everything's okay with my brain, while I'm wired up in ICU, being told by doctors that like I'm supposed to be dead. But anyway, the next morning, so they like do the whole shoot up in the artery in your leg and do all the tests. And anyway, we get done. And I'm back up in ICU. And by this point, my mom and my parents have come and friends and stuff. And anyway, throughout this day, the portion of this day, all these different neurologists and neurosurgeons have been coming into my room and asking me questions and talking to me, not just the ones that were not just the ones that were assigned to me, but like some different ones. Well, the for some reason, everybody that I knew left my uh, everybody that well, I knew left my room, and I'm laying there by myself for a minute. And this other neurologist walks in, and he starts asking me questions. And I'm a bit of a smart aleck, and I was a big time smart aleck back then. And I kind of looked at him, I was like, "Hey, doc, am I getting billed for your time too? Because you're like the sixth doctor to come in here and talk to me, like, and you're not mine. So are you gonna be like sending me a bill?" He's like, "Oh, looks like no, 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 no." I'm like, "Okay, well, what's the deal? Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, do you want to know the truth?" And I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, I'm being told I'm probably gonna have I'm having brain surgery tomorrow morning. So yeah, I'd like to know what's up." And he's like, "Well, let me pull up your MRI." He pulls up my MRI, my CAT scan stuff. He showed it to me. I was like, "I assume that gigantic glow right there is my hemorrhage." He said, "Yeah." And I was like, "So what's the deal? Like, why are you guys all coming in here?" And he says, "Well, to be honest, we heard that you drove yourself to the hospital, that you were carrying on high level conversation, and just to be blunt, you were still alive. And after, I've seen these, myself and other doctors, we've seen these MRIs and CAT scans, and we're just like blown away that you're not dead, to be honest. And more importantly, the fact that you're talking is just mind blowing because the majority of your hemorrhage is in the Broca region of the brain, which is where verbal communication is controlled. And the see the fact that we're even having this conversation is amazing. So anyway, right about that moment, he gets a call or something and walks off. So I'm laying in ICU by myself, and I'm kind of contemplating this whole aspect of like, okay, I'm supposed to be dead. I'm not supposed to be able to talk. My literal greatest skill is my ability to communicate, like I business development and strategy and logic, interaction with my clients, all that kind of stuff. Like this is literally what is my greatest skill, and somehow I shouldn't have it, but yet I still do. And out of nowhere, I suddenly realized I had this like memory of like, how old am I? How long has it been since, because I was recognizing that, God was giving me a second chance. And I'm sitting there doing the math in my head. I'm like, oh, wow, I am literally at just over 10 years from when I promised God that I would get my life right after having a grand old time in this world and focused on just the purely material. And now I'm being told I shouldn't be alive, yet I am. I shouldn't have my greatest skill, yet I do. And at that moment, God made it extraordinarily clear to me that I had nothing to fear, that my surgery was going to go fine. I was going to come out of it for all intents and purposes as I was, and I had nothing to be afraid of. And so fear all vanished from me. And the next morning, they were getting me all wired up before they doped me up to go cut my skull open. The nurses are coming in. It's going to be okay. Everybody's trying to get me to make sure that I'm fine, not freaking out and such. And I'm like, now let's rock and roll and do this. I'm good to go. Let's do it. And everybody's kind of looking at me like, you're nuts. You may come out of this a vegetable. You might not be able to talk. You may have massive cognitive deficit. You might die. And you're coming in here, ready to, like, you're facing it with no fear. And sure enough, I woke up that afternoon, and I was fine. Actually, had a phone conversation with the client that I mentioned that I was supposed to meet with 2 days prior, and he'd signed the contract, which is great. But I talked to my niece, who's going to be having surgery the next week. Anyway, very long story short, a lot of this stuff. There's a lot more layers to this whole piece of the puzzle, but one of the things that really struck me both about it, facing death and potential vegetable status, if not, being a complete, not what I was. God used this instance both as the mechanism to bring me back around. Not completely, I didn't turn and become good all of a sudden, but just changed my mental focus. But a couple years later, my niece, who was, as I said earlier, was scheduled to have brain surgery the following week, I also talked to her um, right after my surgery. And it's kind of interesting. My niece actually told me a couple years later that the fact that Uncle John had more invasive and more big time brain surgery than her had helped her not be terrified. And when I think about that, of what I went through, was able to help my niece overcome her fear, and God took away mine. It's an amazing feeling. But anyway, anybody wants to come on, feel free. I'm thinking about showing a few random things from different debates that have come along throughout the last 8 months. Some entertaining stuff. And just for entertainment purposes, folks, one of my favorite things that you just can't ever make up. We got to give tribute to Godless Engineer.
But it is not a code, it's a chemical. It's deoxyribonucleic acid. It's an acid. I don't understand why you think it's a code. DNA is no more of a code than Diet Coke and regular Coke.
So, good old Godless Engineer. It's pretty funny. It was literally a month after my first it was literally a month after my first debate, or I started the channel, and it was literally on the 7-year anniversary of surviving my brain hemorrhage. I had 12 subscribers at the time, and I start getting all of these notifications from YouTube about all these different comments that are being left. Well, guess what, folks? Godless Engineer had decided that he was going to take me on because I am just some idiot, and had done this whole review video. So at the time, I've got 12 subscribers. I think it's my third video I decided to review. I've done one debate, and the dude with 50,000 subscribers decides that he is going to come put me in my place. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Well, for those of you that know me, I'm not exactly afraid of firing back with rather strong, I can be a jerk back to people. So for entertainment purposes, this was my response to, before I actually did a response video to Godless Engineer, this was actually what I sent back to him, and ultimately ended up starting the catalyst, which led to one of my most fun debates and best openings of all time. But this was actually my original short response to Godless Engineer way back when.
What's up, everybody? John Maddox here. This is a quick pre-response video reply to Godless Engineer, who the other day decided to attack one of my videos on why evolution has become a central component to the new atheist movement and way to circumvent the need for God in order for life to exist. Now, he specifically attacked my core position, which was that the genetic code is a code base and it's a programming language that enables life to exist and is not purely chemical reactions. Ironically, he responded back and said, yes, it was just chemical reactions, and basically that I didn't know what I was talking about. So, given the fact, Godless Engineer, that you conceded some of my later points and comparisons, that it was not a reasonable conclusion that a code base of any kind would be able to come into existence without an intelligent agent existing prior to its execution, before I spend the time to really dive into why you're stunningly ignorant and uneducated in regards to this whole topic, I would like to grant you the opportunity to retract your positions, or I will be forced to embarrass you in regards to your stunning lack of knowledge and how you apparently are part of the brainwashed demographic that seems unable to actually read basic literature and comprehend what is actually being put forth, and how something directly entails and is not purely analogous to a computer language. So I look forward to your response. Do you retract, or shall I proceed to embarrass you?
Well, he did not retract. He doubled down. He tripled down. He went after it again in other debates using the exact same stupid, now famous Diet Coke and regular Coke and comparison of genetic code and DNA, which to this day cracks me up that he actually says this. And I actually was going to let his stuff go. I mean, I called him out again in my full-scale response video, all this kind of stuff. He never actually countered any of my positions to those, and then he just went on. But then I came across this stunningly stupid segment from another debate he had months after all this, when I've actually had totally already completely destroyed all of his talking points. And then I come across this, and I just could not control myself. Had to challenge him again.
One of the facets of Christianity is obsolete, specifically the fundamentalist view of Genesis. So, let's see. Let me go through my. We started talking about genetic code, and what I have to say about genetic code is that we can interpret it as genetic code, like as code, as information. But inherently, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a chemical. This chemical reacts with certain other chemicals in various systems in order to produce different proteins. This is akin to like Diet Coke and regular Coke. I wouldn't say that Diet Coke inherently contains any kind of useful information just because it has a chemical code behind it. The change between Diet Coke and regular Coke doesn't prove anything about the existence of God. So I would just caution the use of genetic code as information and as a way to suggest that we need a creator in order for it to exist. And I guess
every time I hear him actually try to say this stuff and act like he knows what the heck he's talking about in this topic, just it's so amazing. I never understand why these atheists continue to act like they are somehow actually putting together coherent arguments when in the modern, like their arguments would potentially be coherent if we didn't know all the things that we now know about biological systems. I mean, to me, it's really amazing if you look beyond the talking points and the headlines and the usual bullet points that are put forth by the Matt Dillahunties and the John Gleasons of the world, who actually don't know what the heck they're talking about, but claim everybody else is stupid. You'd find out just how embarrassing they are. And that kind of leads to what I think is probably, as of right now, is probably the pinnacle moment of my debate career, which would be when I finally faced off against him months later, and came along with probably my best opening statement so far. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it was quite entertaining, and I really enjoy. I occasionally listen to this one every once in a while. This was a good one.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight has multiple aspects of significance to me personally. August 9th in the year of our Lord 2020 is both my 36th birthday and the date which marks having lived 50% of my life here in the United States and 50% in the place of my birth, the United Kingdom. It also marks facing off against the very first atheist who came after me personally since I started engaging in YouTube apologetics when he supposedly debunked one of my videos. Now, in that light, let this day stand as a line of demarcation for me and to all those who meet me in the future. whether it be in person or in the digital ring of debate in which we are currently engaged. From henceforth, there will be no quarter given to the enemies of our Creator, nor those who refuse to look beyond the pathetic talking points spewed by my opponent and those like him. The verbal weapons you wield are broken. Your arguments are juvenile and lacking in substance. The more I engage with atheists, the more I realize you are mental children desperate to avoid the obvious. That the dogma of naturalism and its foundation of Darwinian evolution is nothing but a cloud of smoke which is decimated by the wind of rational thought and logical analysis. We are told that evolution is a settled and proven science, yet its very foundation is based upon the assumption that information can come from nothing. If this is so, why then does all modern science prove beyond doubt that life cannot reproduce without the genetic code housed in our DNA? In any other context, a person would be considered insane to insist that a language of any kind, spoken or written, could form without consciousness and intellect being required. I ask you, would any rational person argue the numerous languages used for the software and design of hardware required for this debate? Could they possibly somehow spring into existence by chance? Without intelligence and logic, can any of these concepts be devised? I would say no, but I shall let the words of my opponent address this question. I leave the determination of his rationality to you, the audience.
This brings me to what my next video will explain in much more detail, and that is the genetic code, and more importantly, the information it contains. Atheists desperately attempt to avoid the premise that it actually contains real information and is not just purely deterministic chemical reactions.
I mean, it is just chemical reactions. Like I said at the beginning of this, DNA can be interpreted as a code, but that does not make it inherently a code. We can determine certain sequences, and we can know the effect of those sequences on the rest of the organism, or on certain biomechanical operations or chemical interactions within an organism. Like, we can determine those things. Just because we can determine sequences in DNA does not mean that it inherently contains code, though.
DNA it's an identical process to computer codes. And it's very interesting that, you know, computer ideas about computers developed early in the 20th century. And, you know, Claude Shannon comes along in 1948.
But it is not a code. It's a chemical. It's deoxyribonucleic acid. It's an acid. I don't understand why you think it's a code. DNA is no more of a code than Diet Coke and regular Coke.
There needs to be no question that communication theory applies to biology. Okay, all of these concepts can be applied to DNA.
Is that debated anywhere?
Only among people who are ignorant, frankly. Okay. People in the know do not debate.
But not in
this
this
fact.
credible scientific community. This is well understood.
There is no credible scientific argument to try to say that applying communication theory to biology is somehow inappropriate. Yeah. There's hundreds of scientific papers that go very deep into the subject. Yeah. And so, no, there's...
And again, the only people that have ever mentioned this or ever said this or ever expect this are creationists, just like you.
I'm talking at the moment with Perry Marshall and Kevin Ham. Perry Marshall is from Chicago in the United States, and Kevin Ham is from Vancouver in Canada. And we have just taken part in the United Kingdom launch of a huge prize to be won by anybody who can produce the genetic code or a genetic code via natural process generating it itself. Mm-hmm. Perry, have I got that right, first of all?
That's right. Any code, any encoding, message decoding system that can come out of an emergent property from chemicals to code would qualify.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the most fundamental questions in all of science. And it just hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves.
That's right. It hasn't. And I think that's partly why we've been highlighting it in the meeting that we've just had here at the Royal Society in London. You can't get much more prestigious than that, can you?
No, it's
by the way.
It's delightful.
Yes. Now, question perhaps also to Kevin, does it really need to be 10 million? You know, I'm a scientist. To me, that's a huge sum of money.
But It is not a code. It's a chemical. It's deoxyribonucleic acid. It's an acid. I don't understand why you think it's a code. DNA is no more of a code than Diet Coke and regular Coke.
Damn, dude, there's 10 million on the line for this one. I guess you just need to fly over to Oxford, go meet up with the Royal Society and tell them how they've been completely duped on this entire premise of the genetic code actually being a real code, and that they don't need to be remotely associated with it because it could completely decimate their credibility as academics.
In the information age we currently enjoy, to me, it's a completely implausible concept to conclude that HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, WordPress, apps, or any of the other aspects of technology that utilize software, they could possibly come into existence without programmers and designers being required.
I agree. That would be crazy to assert, but luckily that's not what we're asserting. That's not what anybody's asserting here. It's only you that's claiming that evolution would entail this. So you're basically building a straw man argument against people that already accept evolution and are misrepresenting their arguments for evolution. You see, the biggest difference here is that we have natural explanations for like why DNA looks the way that it does, why it operates the way that it does, and why the diversity of life that we have here on Earth exists. We have natural explanations for why these things happen. We don't have explanation for why like PHP exists, other than somebody designed it. So what you're really doing here is you're comparing bananas to horses here.
And while it continues to fascinate me that people such as Godless Engineer continue to make these same assertions, I'm just going to pull up a few papers real quick and scroll through them on how the genetic code, it's a universal enigma from Eugene Koonin. I mean, he's a very high level, actually an atheist, but he admits that there's a code and it's a major conundrum for origin of life. We've got things like dual syntax. I'm pretty sure that syntax is a component of coding and programming. Go figure. Apparently that doesn't exist, but here's evidence that it does. And then here we can really get into some fun stuff where not only is the genetic code have its own programming logic, translational pausing is a subset syntax and code base, which enables a dual control of, from a timing perspective, we're talking about 3D printing logic rules that are executed through the ribosome, through the dual syntax in the genetic code that supposedly isn't a code, even though it houses all sorts of controls, including space and time, which I think is just fascinating. And then you go over into, here's another paper on how computational theory applies to genetics. I mean, you can just go on and on and on with all these different pieces, and you get into information. And here's some interesting stuff about prescriptive information and formal information and how it requires forethought and logic in order for the ciphers and the algorithms to be executed. But according to my opponent, none of this stuff actually exists.
There's just no logical, plausible, and probable conclusion you can reach that says binary code will magically transform into syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and all the other if, then, and else logic rules that are required for any type of programming to actually work.
And again, the only people that have ever mentioned this or ever said this or ever expect this are creationists, just like you.
Now, before I go into my formal arguments against neo-Darwinism and modern synthesis, I want you all as the audience to just observe one of the many nanomachine component processes is required for life to exist.
What you are about to see is DNA's most extraordinary secret.
We're gonna come back to that here in a minute. Chris Keith has joined the the sub party. What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, buddy. Good to see you. Congratulations on your 900 subscribers.
Appreciate it. I was kind of surprised. I jumped up like 70 something subs in the last like 2 weeks. So
awesome. I'll have to say, the reason I got into this community was through one of your videos. So
really,
yeah, definitely. So I've got to give you good credit. Yeah, I'd watched you on I can't remember what it was. I watched something, and then I got on your channel and started watching some of your videos, and then we had a couple of comments, and then I subscribed, and then that's kind of how I got into the community. So I appreciate it.
Oh, awesome, man! I did not know that.
Yeah.
Hey, one brother coming in and
yeah, and then I got
to
met Brother Jungle, and I got to meet him in person, and then that was through you kind of too, you know. So I mean, yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's been good times. I love your shows, and I know you've been busy lately, but I always enjoy it when you put one on.
Oh man, I tell you what, I really do find it fascinating how the rarity of the decent after show. You notice that?
Yeah, it's true.
I'm like, this is not exactly that complicated. You know, I really don't understand why it's not a more common thing. I was thinking about, I was like, man, maybe I should like start another channel and like it just be after shows, because
yeah, I really enjoyed that one other night. Even though
oh man, the one the other night was I think it was by far.
Yeah.
It's either the number one or like there's maybe one other one I can think of that might have been pretty close, but that one was the one the other night was pretty good. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I mean, if you get some people that civil discussion and an honest debate, you know, that's awesome.
Okay, so who is this? All right, everybody. So somebody, the screen name saying "Deny the Trinity, deny." Let's see what this is. Okay, so I'm assuming that deny the Trinity, deny the Bible. I'm assuming you're an atheist.
No, I'm a Christian.
Okay, who's this?
It's Will. I joined last time.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Hey, Will.
How are you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty
Will's
good.
from Canada, right? French Canadian. He's 15, I think, 15 years old.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
man. Will, I apologize. Yes, I'm sorry. I had a minor brain fart. There's all this controversy about the Trinity going on. When I saw "Deny the Trinity," I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Here we go. It's about to be a drama fest. Now, hey, what's up, man? Appreciate you joining us.
No, I'm not an atheist. I'll never be an atheist.
Now, you actually have. Now, for everybody who doesn't know Will, he's actually very impressive. 15 years old. You're 15 or 16?
Really is.
15. I'm close to. 24th May. I'm getting 16.
Okay, but he's
close to my birthday. Real close. 4 days off.
Very advanced for his age. Very understanding and mature. Thinks things through and actually puts forth interesting thoughts and considerations on topics that, quite frankly, a significant percentage of adults never even think about. Many of the ones, especially on the atheist side, that do, it really goes over their heads. And yet somehow this 15-year-old kid's able to comprehend it. It's amazing. It's fascinating how some of them aren't able to
he knows
comprehend the basics.
Yeah, he knows a little bit about scripture and everything too, or no, quite a bit actually. Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah, I usually read around like 10 to 15 chapter a day in the Bible.
See, you're way ahead of me. I mean, although I was saved a younger age than you, you know, I was real familiar with the gospel, but I don't know. I was just doing other things. I didn't probably go back reading as much as you probably do right now. But of course, I didn't have the internet back then. You know, we barely had cars when I was born. So
now that's actually the not having cars. That was more in George's early days. And everybody, so George, we're graced with his presence now because apparently in Australia, the totalitarian restrictions have been somewhat lifted. So he's now off drinking privately distilled whiskey and eating all sorts of good food. But George, thank you so much for joining us. Glad you're no longer on house arrest.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to congratulate you, mate. And I just want to tell the audience there is nothing more epic than an epic Maddox after show. Absolutely epic. By the way, that scotch was really nice.
I bet it was. Was it a single malt?
Yeah, and believe me, I regretted it the day after.
Oh, so since I told George this the other day, but in context of my whole like brain surgery and such, so one of these, I have like no recognized cognitive deficit. I had no therapy after the fact, all that kind of stuff. The one irony of like pretty much, there's a few little very, very minor things I've identified over the years that are results of my brain surgery, but the one that is like inescapable is that I do not drink anymore. And I waited, after my brain surgery, I waited a little over a year. I went out, I had 2 beers, and the next day I tried to get out of my bed. I almost fell over. I had the most blistering hangover headache, and not like a hangover, okay, I can function. It was like completely incapacitated me. And I mean, I literally could not walk straight. And I had 2 beers the night before. I'm like, wow, I guess I have not yet recovered. And I'm not ready for this. So I waited another like 6 months, and I had 2 beers and 1 shot, and I was at a commission for 3 days. And I was like, well, I guess this means I don't drink anymore. Anyway, years later, I found out that it's amazing how balanced our bodies are. But apparently, if you've ever had your cranium punctured, you never actually regain the optimal intracranial pressure. And this results in like exacerbated headaches if you get dehydrated, if like the effects of alcohol, not necessarily from like the drunken perspective, but the negative ramifications are dramatically exacerbated. And it's like, huh, how ironic. God let me live, but basically put it in place so that my dumbass would never go back and start drinking too much. The part of it, you kind of put a physical, I mean, obviously I could if I really wanted to and wanted to be an idiot, but it's like, man, I can't even function with a hangover. It's not even like being able to function on a hangover. It's like, just can't function. So I am mildly jealous of you, George, that you're being able to still enjoy a good glass of scotch.
No, you're better off, John. By the way, I know quite a few Richard Craniums. You got that one.
I did. Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting. I was giving James a hard time about this. James Kuntz over in MDD, a hard time about this the other night. It's actually interesting. The sleep deprivation actually results in very similar cognitive impact as alcohol. So if you have like less than like, it's like 5 hours and 10 minutes, something like that,
excuse me,
your cognitive ability actually declines the equivalent of like a 1.2 blood alcohol level. And you kind of think about your reflexes and all those different things, your processing capacity, those kind of things completely, get deprecated as you go along. And I've always wondered about that in the context of doctors. It's like, okay, hang on. So you guys make it a point to have doctors be operating on sleep deprivation while they're trying to make decisions on how to keep you alive. Interesting. It's kind of a weird one. But enough about me. So George, how are things in Australia now that you're not on ridiculously rigid lockdown?
Well, the 14-day average is 0, meaning that we've got no new cases, so they've lessened the restrictions. I just came back from having lunch with some friends at a hotel, but there were restrictions in the hotel. You couldn't have more than 10 people in a space. I don't know how they work out the space, but there's still some restrictions, but not as bad as what they used to be. We're allowed to go outside the 25-kilometre zone. That's why I went up to the mountains to mow the lawns. And by the way, those mosquitoes, after they sucked my blood, they were flying around into the walls. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were responsible for the intoxication of underage mosquitoes, eh?
Yeah. I believe it's only the females that suck the blood, though. So I don't know what that means.
Well, George, we always knew that it was only a matter of time before you were influencing those young ladies. But I hope you took the precautions, because your wife may not be okay with that. Oh
yeah, well I wasn't encouraging them to come to me. They just naturally attracted.
No, so for those of you who don't, one little quasi-private joke between me and George about so he recognizes the fact that he better never be stupid in relation to his wife, or he will not survive. That's she's made it quite clear to him that he's got an amazing woman, and he better not mess it up. And I think
oh yeah. And she won't let me forget it, I tell you.
Yeah, it's $1,000 here if you're with 3 people because of the coronavirus. $1,000 ticket.
If you're with more than 3 people?
Yeah, one of my cousin literally got like a $1,000 tickets for being with like 10 people.
I honestly don't know how, like, this whole madness.
Yeah.
I just don't understand how much longer they think they can push this without having massive, violent response.
I have like a conspiracy theory. I just think it's for preparing us to the mark of the beast. Because imagine if they can get everyone to wear a mask when they put something to buy food, and everyone's gonna take it.
Well, I mean, you're not the only one that is going that way, and the irony is that it's not like that concept is exactly being it's not like that premise is not being put forth publicly. You got the quantum dot technology, tattoo technology. They've got, I mean, it's been patented. You've got RFID chip implantation being tested in multiple countries. The active move towards removing cash from the equation.
Yep.
I mean, one of the things I thought was a very interesting, market test, if you will, at least here in the United States, was all these different stores were no longer accepting cash. Then it was, somehow the United States Treasury doesn't have any coins. Like, we're out of coins. So please just stop using them. It's like, hang on. How is it that when people aren't leaving their houses, there's less coinage available? Like, people are doing all these electronic transactions. It's not like they just had all these coins sitting in their house and weren't spending them. Like, let's be real. And I mean, has the treasury shut down? Are you not making any more coins? Like, most of that stuff is done by a robot. So you can't operate the mint to create new coins. This seems very strange to me. I think it was a test to see how people would respond.
Well, for the 3 days that I was away, John, the shops that I went into all had signs at the front. No mask, no entry. You had to sanitize your hands before you walked in, and it said no cash, card only. So it's coming.
Oh yeah, I see that kind of stuff all over here in the United States. I mean, now a lot of people just ignore it, but pretty much every store, at least here in Nashville where I live, literally every store has a sign that says no mask, no service. They've got the hand sanitizer when you walk in the door, and they're handing out the masks and everything, and it's kind of crazy. Whoa! Somebody's got major background noise. Matthews, have you seen the temperature scanners in Brazil at the entrance to malls? I hadn't seen them in Brazil. I know they're doing that in Singapore, in Korea. I think they're doing it in Japan.
Philippines.
Okay, Philippines. I wouldn't be surprised that there's probably some instance of that somewhere in Australia, I'd imagine.
I think we have some here in Canada and Ontario. I'm not sure. I've seen it.
Well, and I don't know what's been going on in some of like in New York City and Boston, LA, because they've had it's on video during the major portion of the shutdown. They had drones flying around Boston and New York, like literally something out of a freaking sci-fi dystopia movie. With the giant speakers. You must comply with social distancing, maintain 4 feet separation, or maintain 6 feet, all that kind of stuff. And the walk in New York City, like going through Central Park and stuff, and the police walking like in a whole line, and you had to you could be sitting down by yourself on a bench, and if you didn't get up and leave when the cops walked through, they were arresting people, zip tying their hands, grabbing little kids, zip tying them, throwing a bus for sitting on a bench in a park by themselves.
Well,
that's a crime. When that becomes a crime, all semblance of law and order has left the building.
Yeah, we cannot even go in park or not even walk in them. It's so stupid.
Yeah, we had the drones, and I'm pretty sure have had the number plate recognition software, and they actually married it up with where the car was registered, and they could tell whether you're outside the 5 kilometre or 25 kilometre zone. So people were getting fined because of that.
So you better not. So all the road cameras were being able to identify if you were. Wow. Yeah.
That too. Yeah.
Well, one of these that really pissed me off about the supposedly conservative governor of Tennessee, when they were doing this whole analysis of whether or not they were going to reopen, rescind executive orders, things of that nature. They publicly disclosed that one of the reasons they weren't going to was that they had accessed the GPS data of everybody in Tennessee and mapped it out to see if we were driving more or less than was normal.
Whoa.
And I'm like, well, hang on. I don't know how it is in Australia and the European, different countries in the European Union and such, in Canada, but I know for a fact in the United States that you're supposed to have a warrant before you have access to that information. I know beyond doubt you have to have that, because in a criminal case, they have to go get a warrant in order to access the GPS data to determine, if you were in proximity to a crime. So if in any other context you're required to have a warrant, why were you not required to have a warrant? And they made this whole excuse of like, oh, well, we're not looking at your name. We're just looking at the path and to see if it's more active. Like, I don't care. You still have access to private data. This is not there's no option on this in terms of whether either you have access to my private information or you don't. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I was given a little Bluetooth device which connects into the diagnostics port in the car. I was told it was for free, and it would help me diagnose any problems before they happened, and it would notify the service center, etc., etc. But I'm sure with that technology, they can also track you as well.
Oh, of course they can. I mean, it's at this point, the premise of being able to go somewhere and them not be able to track you down if you're using any element of modern technology, it's whether or not they're tracking you depends on if you have a red flag waving or not. I watched a whole documentary series one time on the how they can identify you.
Whoops.
I think he just freeze there.
Yeah, he just froze there.
Well, YouTube's been doing that. It was a little wonky yesterday. There was quite a bit of buffering going on. But this might be something on his end, and since we're all three still going good. But
yeah. I'm not getting any buffering here, Chris.
Okay.
It looks like it's just John's side.
It's probably something on his end right now for the moment. He'll probably reboot. But yesterday it was very hit or miss there for a couple hours with a lot of people. So hopefully it's just something small. Yeah, it's what I think he's probably what Neff usually does. Neff sometimes has a problem. He just reboots and comes back in. But how you been doing, George? I heard him talking to you there. So you guys are a little bit off the lockdown maybe now?
Yeah. Since last Sunday, they announced it. And like I said, for 2 weeks now, we've had 0 cases.
Awesome.
That's good. But there's still some restrictions on the size of gatherings, and hopefully that'll continue, and they'll lessen that as well, so that we can all go to restaurants like we used to and have a nice meal with friends.
Yeah, that'd be great. What season are you guys in? Are you guys? Because I don't know if you have seasons like we do.
Yeah. We're about we're into spring. We're about
okay.
2 or so weeks into from summer. 1st of December is our summer. Yeah.
So you guys are really real opposite of us. Then you kind of go into your spring and summer as we go into our fall and winter. Okay, John made it back.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm plugged into Ethernet until I lost my internet. Go ahead, George.
Chris, something you should know, mate. Australia from the future. Today, It's Friday here.
I know that.
It's probably
yeah.
Thursday
And
over
you
at
do
your
know
place.
it's Friday the 13th too, right? So
Is it really? I didn't notice
yeah,
it.
it just
Oh,
turned
it is
12 a
too,
minute
yeah.
ago. That might have been why John's thing froze.
Yeah, somehow I'm literally plugged into, direct connect Ethernet cable, and
Still,
I'm the one that's losing signal. I'm literally on a 1 terabyte, or sorry, the 1 gigabyte connection, all that kind of stuff at the top of the line internet, and I'm the one that's freezing. Makes no sense.
Yeah, that's how mine is. Well, my phone will be running off the Sprint Magic Box, and then sometimes my internet will go out. I'm just like you, my internet will go out, and then I'll be like, but my Magic Box holds strong, no matter what.
Yep. Yeah, I was wondering about that. And I tell you one thing that really pissed me off. So I was about to I had AT&T. I was about to cancel because Comcast was going to give me a better option. And they're like, oh, well, we can upgrade you to a gigabyte for $50 a month. And I'm like, so I'm paying $70 right now for what do I have? And they're like, oh, you have $100. I'm like, okay, so it can cost me less money to have literally 10 times faster internet? You really? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. Okay, so I have to get a new router. Like, oh no, just give me just a second. They're literally throttling you. It's not from a hardware perspective. They're doing it on a. So I'm like, she's like, okay, go ahead and hit restart on your box. And next thing I know, I'm getting, I've got the terabyte or the gigabyte, sorry, internet. I'm like, I don't have to get new hardware. You little.
Yeah, Sprint.
I'm like, so
Sprint
I'm now paying $20 a month less for 10 times faster service that I could have had if you guys didn't have a throttle on me. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, Sprint did it for a while. Like it was unlimited until you got to like so many you use so many gigs, and then they would throttle you back. But since I got the Magic Box, it doesn't matter if they throttle me or anything. But now it's like they got it so high I would never use that much on my phone. But I think I got a terabyte on my through the Comcast or Xfinity. So I got a 2-year package. It was pretty good. I really got it for my grandfather so he could have access into some YouTube. He likes to watch a lot of old westerns, and then he stuff from the war and stuff. So, but anyways,
well, I'm pissed off at Sprint right now because I've been a Sprint customer for like 12 years. And I've been grandfathered in to the unlimited everything, no throttling, all that kind of stuff. Well, somehow since this merger with T-Mobile, I got a notification the other day, like just a notification if you're getting close to surpassing 50 gigabytes for the month, you won't be charged anything additional, but you will lose speed. And I'm like,
priority, yeah.
I'm like, I have literally stayed with Sprint because I've been grandfathered in. Now you're going to change what I've been grandfathered in at? I may be looking elsewhere because you don't exactly have the best service of all time, but I haven't hated you, but I know that there's others that do have better signal,
Yeah, signal-wise, especially where I live at. Verizon's the top dog where I live at, of course.
And Sprint, I've been having major problems with Sprint since they've done the merger because now they're trying to like merge everything between the T-Mobile towers and the Sprint towers.
Yeah.
And so it's so bizarre. I mean, I'll be out driving around and I'll get notifications of like all connections are lost. And then, you drive around, drive another quarter mile and you're back to 5 bars in the middle of a freaking city.
Well, I don't know about
I'm not dropping to roaming. I'm not going to 3G. It's like at 4G, 5 full signal, nothing. Like lose everything. Data, cell signal, everything. Just done.
That's what was happening to me in my house. And they came out, they sent somebody out, and I'm sitting dead smack in between 2 towers. So when I upgraded to the latest 9, well, the one when I got it was the latest one, the Galaxy 9. That's when they gave me that Magic Box because I guess it's cheaper on them to build more towers to give the people that it's like a mini cell phone tower. I put it way back in my back room. I had it by my the best spot was like unfortunately right by my window by my bed. But I didn't want that thing by my head, so I put it way back in the back room, and it still works good.
All those waves going into your skull.
Well, they say but then I read some stuff that says keep your cell phone 3 to 6 feet away at night. So I put it way far away when I'm listening to something. And I don't I don't know, man. I just don't want it by my head for some reason.
No, I mean, there's studies
intuitively. Just
and by the way, Will had to go take off. So, Will, thanks for swinging by as always, man. You're always welcome. I apologize for not recognizing your latest iteration of your screen name. You're welcome as always. And the fifth trumpet has arrived. What's going on? Appreciate you joining the stream. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for bringing me in. I just had to ask you because you were saying that you saw a documentary on how they were tracking you, and then the internet went down. So I was just wondering, I mean, what was this documentary? How are they tracking?
Well, I mean, the documentary I was talking about was in context of how they're being able to use video and like different AI software to like identify you from random things, like your personal gait, like as you walk, like the way you your step patterns and stuff. If they have a comparison, they're being able to, or if they're like able to have you on video, okay, this is the guy. The system will analyze your walking pattern, and then they'll put that into all the data feeds, or run all the data feeds of all the cameras that are around a city, for example, and run it through that filter and see if they can identify somebody. And it has a pretty high level of success. They're being able to get into multiple, like they might not be able to identify you off of one, but they can look at like, okay, they got their face covered, but we're being able to analyze things about their eyes and their ears and their gait. Then we're going to know with, very, very high probability that yes, this is the person we're looking for. And
yeah,
it's pretty,
John,
it's like the irony is like, we've seen this kind of stuff in the movies, right? For years, them do this kind of stuff. The fact is that it's now reality in terms of actually being able to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because it's not just like, you can't just leave your phone at home, that's not, you're not going to get away from it just by doing that.
No, I recommend everybody keep a piece of black tape over your camera. You can't do, I guess, much about your microphone, but I was hacked and had somebody I was playing chess with literally tell me what shirt I had on. So yeah, it definitely happens.
There's so many ways to do that, and that's the thing. One of my other streams, I talked about this, of how I remember when there was a complete and utter transformation of all cell phone technology in the United States back in 2011, 2010, maybe 2010, 2011, somewhere in there, when under the Obama administration, they issued an order, like there's a new regulation that came into effect that the easily removable battery was not just not recommended, it was no longer allowed in cell phones sold in the United States. And
convenient,
And then when there was the analysis of all this, it's like, wait a minute, if the only way for me to completely negate remote access to my phone and remote activation from the carrier level to my device is if I removed all power from the equation, you have literally made it impossible for me as the big brother perspective. You made it impossible for me to have this device on my person and you not, under the auspice, if we have the right warrants, then right. Okay, cool. So right this second, you're required to get a warrant, maybe. Wait, turns out the NSA was violating that big time. Thank you, Snowden, for letting us know about that one. It's like they've been violating that out the yin yang. And anyway, enough of my tangent.
Yeah, if you watch that movie, you're just kind of like, they're listening to everything. Well, I've known that for a long time, man. I mean, for a long time, they've been listening to everything. I mean, and then up here, even in my little town that I live in, the Walmart, they completely recently pulled out all the regular things where you can go through and swipe, and get your stuff yourself, and they put all facial recognition in there. So, and it's supposedly for to stop people that's not supposed to be in there. I guess they've been convicted of shoplifting before, whatever. But yeah, we know what it's for, man. It's for tracking.
Well, some of the best origination, or maybe not origination, but probably implementation plus testing of some of this higher level AI. I mean, it's been done in Vegas. I mean, I mean, they've got
Vegas is crazy.
I mean, Vegas has got some amazing
I've watched
cameras. I mean, and they're using a lot of those different biometric marker tags, not necessarily like just fingerprints and stuff. I'm talking about like your walking pattern, height coupled with eyes. I mean, because a lot of times the con artists, they go to pretty high levels of disguise. Right?
Oh yeah.
And it's they want to get in, get a hit, and get out. And so I mean, the casinos have gone to pretty high levels to really be able to identify those folks.
Wasn't Sal banned from some of the casinos?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was card counting blackjack. Yeah.
That was my game. Blackjack was my game.
I gotta believe that there's something in the credit cards. I'm just guessing. I don't know for sure. I'm just saying you would think that they have those chips now in the credit cards. There very well could be something like I don't know if it's a GPS or whatever. I mean, I'm just guessing, but because that has your name, that has who you are, and you always have your credit card on you, right? So,
well, I mean that data is embedded in the chip, but it's a matter of having the RFID scanners with enough sensitivity to be able to access it. So theoretically, yes, you could be like some of those card cloning devices. Like a couple years, like a year and a half ago, I had a debit card.
I got burnt too.
Get cloned, and I'm like, wait a minute. And they hadn't figured out where it had been happening. I went to a Dairy Queen, and I was getting a burger, and I'm sitting there, and apparently they were cloning cards. Somebody was like sitting in the parking lot in proximity to the drive-through lane, and as people were like always getting out their cards, sitting there for enough time, they were being able to remotely access the information and then clone a card.
They got me, John, and before I even got home, though, luckily my credit card caught it. I mean, they caught it within like 5 minutes. They were, the gas pumps. You go up to the gas pumps, they'll put those little things on the gas pump, so when you put your card in, it's not really, you're not really putting it in there, and then they'll well, actually, it'll go in and you'll be able to use it and get your gas, whatever. They'll pull all your information and they'll come back by there. They'll sit across the street and then they'll pull it. Yep. But the thing is, I hadn't used that one a lot, and so they try to go in there and use like $100 or something like that, and it instantly, I don't know, which is crazy. I wouldn't think it'd do it for $100, but it did. They called me and said, did you, it denied them, and they asked me, if it was me, and I was like, no, and then so they caught it.
That's why I've got multiple accounts, Chris, and my credit card is linked to one account that has no more than $1,000 in it at any time.
I got 2 bank accounts, one just for like regular crap, and then one I save in. But I don't carry that card at all out of the house. Or no, actually, that's not even my house, at my mom's. But long story short, but they will do that, like sit those places and across, like I said, across the street, and they do it all the time. So never use your if you're going to pay for gas, never use those. Always go inside and pay, because if you don't have a good fraud protection, with your provider, whoever you get your card from, then you're going to get burnt.
I'll tell you one of the funniest things of people, card fraud stuff. Some idiot broke into my car one time. I was whenever see my parents spend the night. I wake up the next morning, some idiot come through, broken into people's cars, and like an idiot, I left my wallet in my car. Anyway, so I reported, I cancel all the cards, all this kind of stuff. So it fast forward a couple weeks, and they call me, and this idiot who was staying at a cheap hotel down the street, not only had he gotten arrested, this moron had left, even though all the car, of course, literally the next day, and he jacked like $500-600 from me, literally the next day, I'm of course canceling all the cards, freezing them, that kind of stuff. They arrest him, and they call me. I go and pick up we have your wallet and stuff. I go pick up my wallet. He had all of my credit cards still in. I'm like, so you arrested him a week and a half later, and he still had my cards that were frozen on his, like, at his place? Like, how dumb are you? You, like, if they're all frozen, not working anymore, like, why would you keep the evidence of your crime?
People's done that
Like
and with
idiots.
murder.
And
with
apparently
murder.
this guy had like, I mean, 20 different wallets and purses and stuff in his hotel room with like all the credit cards and stuff. And like, so you've just got, who knows how many counts of credit card fraud, like everything it's possibly needed, like in your hotel room. And all you had to do was throw it in the garbage and you'd have gotten away with the crime. It's amazing.
You mentioned that, John. You know what? I never understood these people that go in and they rob a bank and they let's say could do a quick grab. They want to get $5,000-$10,000. You know how easy it would be just to do fake get accounts, bank accounts, or kite money or something like that. To go and do that, the time you get so much lesser. You know what I mean? You can probably get probation for that than you would if you went in. That's federal automatic time. So. Just not that I'm giving anybody any ideas. I'm just saying, like, if you're gonna be a crook, I mean, try to be a smart crook, So
random sidebar, guys. So I don't know how many of y'all saw my rather interesting debate last night on MDB with Vladim or whatever on voter fraud.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I read, yeah.
That one was entertaining. But
did you bring up the glitch, the 6,000 vote glitch?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I brought the glitches. I mean,
I missed
the data, like all this. Oh yeah. But here's what really gets me. So in the comments today, this is where we come down to like just this, like devolution is true beyond doubt because people are really this dumb. This guy in comments was going on a whole diatribe about how you can't make. The only way that you can make accusations of fraud is if you accuse people of doing it before it happened. And I'm like, that is quite possibly one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Like, so you're suggesting that we need to arrest people before they commit the crime? Or are you stuck in reruns of Minority Report? Because like, there's the whole point. Like, you can't arrest people for pre-crime. Like, otherwise we live in like complete and utter dictatorship. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I think you're going to do this. Therefore, you're in prison. I mean, what are you going to charge somebody with? Like, the election hasn't happened yet. How can you accuse somebody of fraud if the voting action has not yet taken place? Like, it's like, wow, this is what we're actually dealing with. This is amazing.
John, before I go, I just want to congratulate you again, and hopefully you'll hit that magical mark of super chat and super sticker. And just want to say to Lena, I think she's in the chat still, there's nothing wrong with your accent, Lena. Just join in and have a bit of fun.
Oh yeah, Lena, I enjoyed talking with you over with Otangelo the other day. You're welcome to come in anytime. The link, if anybody wants to join, is actually in the description, and I'll post it in chat again real quick. I appreciate you, George. Thanks for coming on. Hey, everybody, you should make sure to go and subscribe if you're not to Standing for Truth. George has actually been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes and got a whole bunch of amazing expert guests are going to be coming on for interviews. Actually have come on, and there's several more they're going to be coming on that he and Redefined Living have gotten to come on to Standing for Truth. So you definitely want to get ready for some of that stuff.
Oh yeah, they should be good. All right then. See you later. See you, Chris.
See you. God bless you, George.
See you, Trumpet.
All right, man.
Bye.
Ciao.
I didn't even notice Trumpet down there. Sorry, buddy. You're blacked out. I didn't even see you down there.
Well, he's got his piece of tape over his camera.
Me. Well, that's me.
It's all your fault, man. He's now in camo mode. You didn't even realize he was here.
There we are. Now
it's actually a Band-Aid.
Now we're equal.
Let me just ask a dumb question. You don't have to spend too much time on this, but I'm just curious. Like, why do you think, like, backtracking, like, when Godless Engineer has his ideas, and then you have a debate, and you guys all say, look, you're wrong because of this reason and that reason. Why does he sort of like discredit all that and sort of continue to think that you're wrong? Why do you think that he?
Well, for him personally, I think one of the primary reasons is professionally, he is at least he claims to be a full stack developer. software. So if he and I've actually talked about this in our original back and forth videos, he's like, well, of course, nobody could develop PHP. I mean, but that's human. Like, it has properties that don't apply. We're just talking about chemical reactions, all that kind of stuff, right? So as a software developer, who runs around crowing about his master's degree in software engineering, if he concedes that all of the parameters for code base, logic rules, programming, et cetera, are present in biological systems, then either he has to agree that something like PHP, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, so on and so forth, could come in. It's reasonable they could come into existence without an intelligent agent, and not only could they come into existence, entire programs could write themselves. And obviously he's not going to concede that. And the second he does concede it, he also say the exact same thing. It's why earlier on, if you heard me talking about like my first debate with RJ Downard, when he agreed that, Google, Snapchat, Facebook, et cetera, could create themselves. I mean, it's like, but RJ Downard uses the excuse that he's not I don't know anything about coding, so I can't really give you a full, explanation. Godless engineer enters the equation. He is a software developer, therefore he does know the significance. And it's if he concedes, and his entire worldview collapses.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly what it is.
Man, we got In His Image and Tony. What's going on, folks? Thanks for joining. In His Image, have you been on the stream before? I'm trying to remember. I know I've seen you in chat before.
All right. See you guys later. Thank you.
See you at Fifth Trumpet.
I'm usually not up as late as you all are. I'm in grad school full time, so the time is not there.
What are you studying?
Master's in biology.
Ah, awesome.
That's kind of why I jumped in, because you're talking about Godless engineer and DNA. But I'll let Tony introduce himself and do whatever before I.
Well, Tony, what's up, brother? How you doing? How's Florida, man? You're in one of the few states that still has some sanity left.
Yeah, we're mostly red down here, so it went pretty quick.
So here's what I need to know. Have you been out fishing?
It's been storming. Getting some crazy wind down here.
Tony likes to, more of the summer, but Tony, on like almost a daily basis, was sending me pictures of the gigantic fish he was catching.
Yeah.
He was just rubbing it in, man. Oh, yeah. I'm out on the Gulf on a boat, chilling off of Florida, going to the beach. I'm going to go catch me some fish. It was like, got some good entertainment out of that.
Yeah, come down anytime.
What part of Florida do you live in, Tony?
I'm actually on the East Coast, but near Melbourne.
Oh, okay.
Tarpon.
Where is that? Where is that in proximity to like Daytona?
An hour south.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Okay, I'll be coming down to land, probably like early January. Coming down for like a week.
Yeah, just text me, man. I'll meet you. I'm not far from there.
Right on. So, In His Image, what do you want us to call you?
Whatever is fine. My name's Emery. If you want to use that, that's
Emery.
fine.
Okay, so Emery, what obviously is, I'm sure you know, my channel is oftentimes about the biology discussion. So what be interested in, since you're getting your master's and such, what are the things about what we've been discussing and the whole godless engineer aspects? What stuck out to you the most?
Did you get what I said? I'm sorry, you guys kind of froze, so I'm not sure whether that's my internet or yours, but did you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. As long as you all can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, I was saying, what about what we were discussing with Godless Engineer? As somebody who's getting their master's in biology right now, like what was it that really stuck out to you the most, or that you found interesting and wanted to bring to the conversation?
Well, I don't want to be too harsh on the man. I think he's done enough damage to himself for me to pile on. But literally, the very first class I took in grad school was quote unquote genome evolution, which genome's not evolving anywhere other than down. But just looking at the statements he made, like I can pull up papers on biological information with 3 clicks.
Yep.
This biology, and I'm not, again, I don't want to pile on the man too hard. I don't really know that much about him. I'm not really into the whole debate community, but for him to get in front of a screen and repeatedly, not just once in a debate where you can slip up in a debate and make a stupid analogy. That happens. You're talking off the cuff. But for him to repeatedly go back to the same analogy, I, as I said in the chat, I don't know how this man has 50,000 subscribers, because at least when it comes to biology, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, he may be a very good computer programmer. I have no idea. I mean, that seems to be what his specialty is. But if he's not willing to dig into his own evolutionary literature and listen to them talk about information, like, let me just read off a real quick quote. I had one here that I pulled up. Just as a side note, I do a lot of reading among the evolutionists, and there is a whole field of science that dedicated just to information, and that's in the biological sciences, not in communication.
You're talking like
where a lot of these
biosemiotics
folks do their work. There's a whole field just dedicated to the study of information, and there's a quote that's not directly tied to this, but I think it illustrates it very well. This is written by George C. Williams, who was probably the premier authority on natural selection in the past century for the evolutionists. And basically his comment was, well, information can proliferate and be edited by natural selection only if the selection affects the information at a greater rate than competing processes such as mutation and drift. Now, what's he getting at? Where's this information coming from? There's only one place it can be. It's in the genome. You can't argue with that, because they literally, most evolutionists, not all, but most will argue that the selection occurs at the genetic level. So he's talking about the genome. He's talking about, and
and it boils down to, in my opinion, it really boils down to how can you select something that does not yet exist?
And that's a fair fair question, and one that I've not seen a good answer to.
You take it from a pre-existing source, like what Craig Venter always does.
Well, yes, and not only that, and this is what
cells that way, yeah.
You know, Erica, what her deep sea vents, we could do a whole show on that and how that's failing.
Well, one of the things from the evolutionary biology perspective, one of the things I find very entertaining and fascinating that's, put forth with such, this is, proven beyond all doubt as a fundamental to all things to do with biology. And just the premise that because I can come up with an algorithm that can explain what changes would have to take place in order for A to become B, because you can come up with that, you're able to somehow suspend all of the rationality and plausibility and probability barriers to that actually happening. And that's the thing that just amazes me. Like, hang on, you're claiming A turned into B, but you don't actually have a way to explain how it remained alive to get through the transition from A to B. Like, this is, does that make sense? What I'm saying there makes sense on the fundamental level?
Yeah, in their fantasy environment.
Yeah, I find that whole premise to be an extraordinarily disturbing one. The level of acceptance in all of these different facets of biological research, whether it be cell biology, genetics, all the different subsets. So many different groups accept it as oh well, this is how it happened, and they're not even looking at it. And that's the thing that really gets me about why in so many different papers that have literally, like, the function that they've discovered, they're describing, they're trying to figure out how it works, has literally nothing to do with evolution at all. But then they feel compelled to somehow be like, well, this must have come from X. It's like, okay, cool, awesome hypothesis. How about the fact that you don't even know how the whole thing works in what we're directly observing? How about you figure that out first before you like make this dogmatic assertion that it must have come from this? I mean, it's a totally different. I don't know, that perspective I find very interesting.
Yeah, Ken Miller did that with the flagellum.
Yeah.
And
Well,
something that I think really plays into this, like one of the classes I had to take for my master's is actual evolutionary biology, and the teacher actually asked a question on the exam, basically saying, "What's the best evidence for evolution?" That was actually on one of the exams, and he actually specified there may be some of you in the class who don't believe in evolution. That's fine, but do not argue against it on the exam. And basically, I think that kind of explains where evolutionary biology is. Like, they recognize there are people out there who might not accept it, but in order to publish, in order to do, and this may be something that I don't know how much you all are aware of this. But there was a paper published a number of years ago in, I believe it was one of the PIVOS journals, where a group of Chinese authors wrote about the function of the human hand. And they used the word design repeatedly. And there was a huge uproar. They didn't mention God, they didn't mention religion, none of that. And the Chinese scientists didn't understand why there was so much backlash, because in China, the word design doesn't have the same connotation that it does here in the US. But I mean, there were people threatening to like never write for PIVOS again. Their editors were saying they refused to review, and they ended up retracting the paper. Not because there was anything wrong with the paper, but because they used the word design. And the authors of the paper actually said, "Hey, look, we didn't realize what this meant. We'll submit an addendum and we'll remove the word design. That wasn't good enough." It's a very tightly self-regulated community, and researchers know if they don't pay lip service to it, they don't get grants, they get ostracized, they don't get the best positions at universities. So they essentially muzzle themselves.
No, it's very, very true, and it's actually kind of interesting. There's actually been I've read several papers. One, I think it was like 2018, from a group of Chinese scientists that actually made the statement of, "We do not need yet another." I think the title of the paper was like, "Why we do not need yet another synthesis," and the whole paper was just eviscerating the different models that evolution has taken to keep, every time they run into a unavoidable barrier, just come up with something totally new, and to account for it. And the got up to the extended modern synthesis and all those different things that are out now, and they're basically like, at what point are we going to recognize that we don't, like, the foundation of all these theories is false? Like, and when I was reading the paper, I'm like, yeah, doesn't surprise me this is coming from a Chinese university. There's not a chance. I don't think there's very many. Well, A, it probably wouldn't get published here in the United States, and B, I doubt many people would have both the courage and the ability, literal ability to get through the barriers to entry to get something like that published.
Yeah, I mean, there was a big fuss recently because some obscure journal that I'd never heard of published two European scientists who were openly associated somehow with the intelligent design movement. They published a paper that explicitly named design, explicitly mentioned design, and the Darwinists just exploded. They demanded the paper be retracted. Now, credit to the paper, the journal, they actually stood by the paper. They said they don't agree with it, but they're going to leave it there, and they put a disclaimer on it. But I mean, just the fact that they can't even tolerate somebody who disagrees with them being published is very concerning, because it basically means that so long as you're within the accepted status quo, you can say just about anything you want and still get published. But if you go outside that status quo, even if you've got good, solid evidence behind you, you will be crucified by your peers in the scientific community.
Yeah, Yeah, it's something I've actually been giving some thought to of coming up with some different concepts to basically address. I personally don't think that there's enough tangible reward for actually calling out false or invalid arguments in the quote unquote peer reviewed literature. I mean, it's like okay, so unless you just, it's one of your personal pet peeves or your personal little babies, the probability of somebody, a fellow scientist who disagrees, not necessarily with the person who's part of the journal, but I mean like one of your research peers, the probability of them taking the time to like debunk your argument while they're busy trying to A, do their own research, and B, go kiss enough proverbial tail to get the grant for their next 2 years or whatever. They don't actually have what's the point of them calling out something that they think is false? And I mean, I don't necessarily mean from a surface level. I mean on the fundamental levels of things like evolutionary biology. Like they don't have any incentive.
No, they don't, and the journals actually de-incentivize it even further, because if there is a study published, what tends to happen is if somebody else decides, something smells fishy about that study, even if it's got nothing to do with creation or anything like that, and they go back and duplicate the study, replicate it, and find out that the study's a mess and the results are all wrong, journals won't publish it. And most universities, you have to publish in order to get advanced positions, sometimes even to stay on staff. And you have to that's the only way to keep your grants coming in. Nobody has incentive to go back and check this stuff. And a lot of times with peer review, what you get is either people who already agree with you, in which case they're not going to review you really carefully, or people who hate your guts for whatever reason, in which case they're going to review you very ardently against. And so you don't get, in the mainstream journals, you don't always get, at least, a fair hearing for ideas, and definitely not for anything that's outside the accepted scientific status quo, unless you are a big enough name that you can force the journals to publish it, which is why someone like Stephen Jay Gould could get away with publishing Punctuated Equilibrium, which was against the entire idea of Darwinism. He was a big enough name, he had enough force behind him that he could get away with it. But unless you're him or somebody like him, you better not challenge the status quo too hard, at least on anything sacred like that, because you're gonna get hammered.
Have you heard of the third way of evolution? It's like evolution.com. It's like evolution, the era of genomics and epigenomics. They got a site. I guess I don't know if they're trying to, it's like they're not for, they're trying to go a different way than creationism and neo-Darwinism. So, I mean, a lot of sciences are looking for like a
I have heard of the third way of evolution. I don't know a ton about it.
They got a website.
Need to research the epigenetics.
But it's actually interesting. That group, it's actually started, and people that are associated with it are not exactly outliers. I mean, there's quite a few major players in cellular biology, physiology, genomics. I mean, they're in some pretty high level, well-established, published people that we're talking about, and they've come to the, a lot of them, they publicly say like, hey, we're not claiming that this is intelligent design. Like, we're not saying that. We just are publicly stating that, the modern synthesis and its different variations do not explain what we observe.
Like
so
Dr. Noble
with a different, we got to come up with something new, because epigenetics and all these different other factors that we're discovering just completely annihilate the fundamental premise and foundational points. It's amazing.
Like Dr. Noble was saying, like, if the old paradigm is true, like Dawkins was saying, like the genotype necessarily controls the phenotype, then physiology really has nothing to say in the matter, which we know through his work in epigenetics that's not true. So they're
Well,
kind
to
of
me,
now.
at this point for me, when we have read, write, and erase proteins doing real-time data modification that directly alters pre-described outcome, yeah, evolution is false. Evolution is done. It's over because you got to account for read, write, and erase real-time data modification, and get out of town if you're going to try and claim that that is nothing but a non-prescriptive chemical reaction. Like,
evolution
get
is
out
just,
of here, man. Just leave. You're either an idiot or you're in denial. If you want to come to the conclusion that that is not like the most mind-bending technology that we have ever come across, you're an idiot. Like, just leave. Don't even come out publicly. And kind of the point you were making in his image of like about for Godless engineer, like, is he just ignorant or is he this dumb? I mean, that's what it comes down to for me.
yeah, he's just willing to be ignorant.
Well, he also gets
I mean,
he
you can
and
take
his
that
other
even further back to the genomic level because you can read the genome in multiple directions
yes.
at the same time.
Yep.
And you can transcribe a gene in such a way that there's something called alternate splicing,
yep.
where you can literally splice the genome in like sometimes some genes it's dozens of ways, but most genes the average is like 2 to 3 different ways per gene that you can splice the gene to create different proteins. I'm sorry, you struggle. You would really struggle to get a genome that could be read in one direction. But the fact that you can read it in multiple directions that can be read multiple different ways, no way. Sorry.
Well, and then you also have to, in terms of the alternate splicing, and it really cracks me up that actually, I think it was my second debate with R.J. Downard, he went on this whole tangent about somehow he thinks that alternative splicing is actually evidence for evolution.
It always is.
Versus intelligent agency. And I'm like, okay. Oh, the point you're making.
That's actually
like,
part of the genome evolution course that I took. Basically, their argument with alternate splicing is that they create new proteins that way by reading the genome in different ways.
Right. But what do we now know about the splicing signals that are in the introns, which alter the alternative splicing?
Exactly. But
completely different. In my opinion, and the reason I'm bringing this up, I would love your opinion on this, because to me, if you can, I think this also destroys the whole duplicate gene being the evolutionary process and stuff argument, because they've been only looking at the exon sequences up until relatively recently. Now they're realizing that the introns, it can be the exact same exon sequence, but with different introns in it, which actually alter the splicing and therefore the protein outcomes. Therefore, it's actually not identical in the way that they thought it was.
That's 100% true. So when my textbook was written, and it was only written in 2016, so it's not that long ago, they were still arguing that introns had no function. They were saying that now obviously I've read some of the more recent literature, but there was literature in 2016 that was saying that introns had no function. Basically, what the gentleman who I say gentleman loosely, who wrote my textbook on this topic is the same guy who wrote a paper entitled "The Evolution-Free Gospel of ENCODE: Attacking the ENCODE."
Oh yeah.
Good old Dan Grauer.
Yeah.
And their argument basically is that because introns have no function, then alternate splicing can create new proteins by reading exons in different ways, and they appeal to something called exon shuffling to move the exons around and duplicate the exons. But with introns having function and in being involved in how the exons are read, that hypothesis just evaporates.
Well, it not only does it evaporate, in my opinion, when you also look at the fact that they now know that many microRNAs are derived directly from introns.
Yeah.
And not only that, they've also discovered that the mature mRNAs actually incorporate basically almost NCAP data packets. The creation of the data packet of the mRNA actually is encapsulated in before like the poly-A tail and such, it's actually got intron caps, and they've now discovered that mutations in those are the direct cause of a variety of diseases. And it's like, okay, so if intron variability is the cause of improper protein outcome, and this is causing a disease, in my opinion, you can no longer claim that it is not a directly functional component. And if it is, then, I mean, I don't know what percentage number to put on it, but I would say that's a gigantic hole in Darwinian theory. I mean, I don't know how you can avoid that one. Does that make sense? Joel, man, what's up? Welcome to the stream, buddy. How you been?
Hey, thank you. Yeah, just got from a long nap earlier today, and I was thinking of trying to add on to what his image was talking about earlier. You're talking about the whole thing about you have to publish a paper no matter how ridiculous to get anywhere in academia, and
yeah,
I like to often kind of contrast that, I guess, with working in science and technology fields outside of academia. I suppose it's quite the opposite. I was saying in chat earlier how I've been in these different various, I guess, for lack of a better word, hard science fields for well over 20 years, and I don't know that I've ever met an atheist, in the professional, science or tech field, and it's largely because those of us, we're not biologists necessarily, but the topics and the stuff that you're talking about in your field and what you shared tonight, we recognize that. We see the technology, the development curves, the ability to process information, things like that, to be able to achieve what we do in our fields. We see the similarities, the parallel in God's design, essentially, in life. And it's a no-brainer. It's like, how in the heck, like John was saying, can you even begin to presume that any of this was not
You
designed?
guys mention that, Joel? Do you mention ID in any of your papers or any of that? Those engineers have mentioned that there's design and all that. Do they get ridiculed?
Absolutely.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, I'm more in a hard science capacity. I just finished my information systems management master's, for example, earlier this year, and so it's like I said, it's a no-brainer. And I like to study physics, physicists themselves, and all kinds of other more hard science, quote unquote, work. Einstein, Planck, Heisenberg, all these these greats for the field of physics, and not all of them. They're not only theists, but most of them are Christians, and that's all they talk about is intelligent design.
I think, Will, did you have a question you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, the simplest cell that we know of, how many protein is there in it?
It's 400 and something. I think it's like 490. And I think they were able to do some knockout experiments and got into like 467 or something like that. It's pretty low, but that one's also it's the mitoclasma. I forget the name. Late night.
Mitochondria?
No, not the mitochondria. This is the supposed simplest cell. It's the mitoplasma. Sorry, I usually know this one. It's late. I've been up since 5 a.m. But that one is actually not a standalone cell. It's basically a parasite. It's dependent on being inside of a host organism and in order to live. So in that one, and then the smallest standalone, I'm not sure the total number of proteins, but I know its genome is like 1.2 million base pairs. And you're looking at a whole boatload of different function requirements inside of that. And they know that, hey, they can't just knock out, that's where the minimum is at. Can't get any less or else it just doesn't work. And and that's all of this stuff too, is when you're getting into that's why I go back to all the hypotheticals of cool, you're claiming that slowly over billions of years, somehow you're going to get to where you have 1.2 million nucleotides pairs in the appropriate the correct sequence.
Yeah.
Like,
Slow
I
changes.
don't care how many times you have to do that. You have to have them in the correct sequence. Like, is there any other context where anybody would actually think that's a remotely plausible thing that would happen?
Yeah,
Because if you otherwise, let's make the next Powerball. You have to pick. We'll do it easy. You got to pick 1,000 numbers in a row correctly. Not just have the numbers, checkboxed on your card. You have to pick the order they're going to come out in a row correctly.
Just give it time.
You just give it time, and we don't really have to show it today. It just took a long time under a rock.
The way I follow through with that is now ask yourself, if somebody managed to pick 1,000 numbers in a row correctly, would you say that they cheated or were just extraordinarily lucky?
They cheated.
Well, of course they did. And they used intelligent agency in some way, shape, form, or fashion to figure out what was going to come out of there. It happened on a deep sea system, or they, figured out the way to hack the machine that was shooting out the stupid Powerball. I mean, like each ball, whatever, they figured out some way to game the system, and nobody would ever conclude that that's a remotely plausible deal.
Just give it time far along the way. Assume it happened, and everything's possible after.
I'd still like to know how deep sea vents are more of a better environment than a controlled laboratory environment, which is what I keep hearing.
Well, I don't know if everybody's seen this, but Dr. Rob Carter came out with a really great video on ATP synthase the other day, and
very good.
Got into some. I mean, I know quite about. I know a lot of us know about ATP synthase, but he was really getting into some of the interesting components of how there's modification done to ADP, GDP, all those kind of different variations that's needed to create the nucleotides. And it's like, so when you really get into like the whole chicken and egg problem, it's like, so you need the synthesis, you need ATP synthase in order to produce the ADP that you need to create the nucleotides, to be able to create the DNA, to be able to create the proteins, to be able to you follow that, you're in the never-ending loop, chicken and egg problems. And it's like, it's not, and that's what really gets me. This seems to go over the heads of the atheists in their desperation to avoid the obvious. It's this process is possible. Well, yeah. There's a bunch of stuff, the things that are possible. It doesn't mean that it doesn't require intelligent agency in order to make it remotely plausible to happen. I mean, if we're going to go down this rabbit hole, how did the Mona Lisa create itself?
Time and magic, right?
They always claim that we believe in a man dying and raising from the dead, but they believe on thing like dead material becoming life, and it's so stupid.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. My debate I had, me and Smokey versus James W. and Amy. They were trying to do this whole it's zombies. You believe in zombie gods. And it's, to your point you were making there, Will, it's like, okay, so I believe in an entity that exists outside of space and time that has the ability to create the universe and is able to manipulate physics, chemistry, all these different components in order for life to exist. And you think that being able to heal something for an entity that has that power is somehow out to lunch.
Yeah, I mean, last time I had an atheist on Discord saying you believe in talking snake and all that garbage, and I was like, don't you believe we're all talking apes? I mean, their logic, and it's just a pure denial of God and their sin, and they just love their sin rather than God.
Yes. Yeah, that's
hey, John.
Yeah.
Hey, that reference you're talking about with Rob Carter, it sounds like it's very close to the chemical question I've been asking for 2 decades now. The what I call the free floating phosphate problem. That includes the dilemma of ATP synthase being able to provide some of the extra energy to overcome some of the energy bondings in the nucleotide base chaining. So I'm curious, where that was, first of all, and second of all, I'd love to see if we can get Rob to help address that. I know there was another gentleman that I was on SFT's channel, I think, a few weeks ago, that I was able to ask that question with. And he was just able to agree that it's impossible. It's not just that these. Okay, cool. It's not just that these chemical reactions are all interdependent. It's that it's physically impossible for it to start without a preformed nucleotide.
Yeah, it's great. I'll play this real quick.
This is Rob's.
Yep. Even though I've been studying biology my entire professional life, there's still a lot I don't know. And every once in a while, I'm reminded of my ignorance. I just read a couple of papers in the Journal of Creation by Royal Truman. He's describing a subset of the genetic process. He's just describing how the transfer RNAs that are used during protein manufacturing are modified before they're used. And I was floored. I had no idea. I had never seen this before. I didn't know this stuff existed. And all of a sudden I had a eureka moment. I said, oh, I've got to share this with my audience. Let me share with you the process of manufacturing a protein. The simple process, as simple as I can make it, given everything that's known. Now, I'm going to skip over a lot of rabbit trails and very interesting side avenues that you can explore if you want, but if you do, you might end up taking your entire life doing nothing but studying biochemistry. This is fun, it's amazing, and the more we learn about God's creation, the more encouraged I am that He is a great God. So in high school biology, all of us are introduced to the concept that a section of DNA called a gene is transcribed into RNA or messenger RNA, and that is then translated into protein. So let's go through the steps of manufacturing a simple protein. I've chosen to use as an example one of the proteins that goes into the ATP synthase motor. What's ATP synthase? It's the world's smallest electric motor. It uses protons or hydrogen ions flowing through a membrane to turn the motor, which is then used, the force of the turning is used to bond a phosphate to an adenosine diphosphate, making adenosine triphosphate or ATP. This is called the powerhouse of the cell. It basically powers, nearly every single cellular process. You manufacture your own weight of ATP every day. Now it's burned up every day also, so it's used and then it's burned. It's used and it's burned. Therefore, ATP is possibly the most important molecule in your body. And yet, as soon as we start looking into this, we run into a check, a big one, because ATP is required to manufacture the ATP synthase motor. ATP is required in the transcription step and the translation step. So we have a chicken and egg problem. What came first, the ATP or the ATP synthase motor? ATP or the cell's ability to use ATP in multiple different ways. This is a very bad problem for the evolutionary origin of life scenarios. This is a wonderful thing if we consider that God created life, but it's almost an intractable problem for the other side. But before we can even begin to describe how to manufacture a protein, we need DNA. We need a way to faithfully copy DNA from one generation to the next, or life is impossible. And when we look at DNA synthesis, we realize that between prokaryotes as bacteria and eukaryotes as everything more complicated than bacteria, there's no commonality between the DNA synthesis systems. They're radically different, as if they don't have a common ancestor. They do things completely different with different proteins and different mechanisms. But let's just look at the eukaryotic DNA synthesis apparatus. In a simplified view, there's a lot more proteins involved than what I'm about to describe, but at a minimum, you need a topoisomerase enzyme. This is a protein that keeps the DNA in front of the area being copied unwound. You need a helicase. This is a protein that uses ATP to open up the DNA strands. You need single-stranded binding proteins. They temporarily hold open the strands so they don't go back together again. You need two different DNA polymerases. These are proteins that zip down the opened up DNA strands and make a copy of each strand. One goes in a forward direction, following the opening fork from the helicase. The other one goes in the reverse direction and works in fits and starts. Therefore, it makes separate little pieces of DNA that have to be joined together with another protein called DNA ligase. But the polymerases need to grab onto the DNA. They need a guide. They actually use an RNA guide. Another molecule called RNA primase adds an RNA tag to the single DNA strand. The polymerase finds that, starts there, and starts zipping down the strand to make a copy of the DNA. Later on, another protein comes, removes the RNA, replaces it with DNA, and then DNA ligase can join it together. That's really complicated. That is some really high-tech stuff, and a lot of research has gone into figuring this out. We're talking about Nobel Prizes, PhD dissertations, billions of dollars of money have been spent trying to figure out how that one system works. But notice, all those proteins that are required for the system to work have to be coded in DNA itself. They have to be transcribed, they have to be translated, and all of that requires a lot of ATP. There's another ATP using step here that most people miss, and that is that the A, C, G, and T, the letters in the DNA, the adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, they come from ATP. You see, there's not like loose A, C's, G's, and T's floating All right, so before I put this on pause for a second, so everybody who's in the audience and obviously in the stream, pay attention to this piece right here, what he's talking about. This, I think this addresses some of the stuff you've brought up, Joel. A lot of the things that we talk about and are glossed over by the evolutionists and the atheists in the context of abiogenesis and like, oh, we can create nucleotides and all this other kind of stuff. Pay very close attention to what you're about to hear in terms of an additional barrier to entry in relation to the abiogenesis standard talking points that we hear all the time.
Around in the cell will grab an ATP, rip off two of the phosphates, and use adenosine monophosphate as the A in the DNA. Well, the G is manufactured through ATP. ATP manufactures GTP. GTP is a source of the G in DNA. Likewise, CTP and TTP. These nucleotide triphosphates are energy intensive. They require a lot of energy to manufacture. That energy comes from ATP. You can't even have DNA without ATP. All right, now that we have a way to faithfully copy DNA from one generation to the next, we have to take a section of DNA only and take that and turn it into RNA. Now, RNA and DNA are very similar molecules. They're nucleotides that are strung together. DNA uses A, C, G, and T. RNA uses A, C, G, and instead of thymine, it uses a nucleotide called uracil. DNA tends to form a double helix, the famous double helix shape. RNA can form double, triple, whatever helix is, but RNA is usually in a single strand. A nucleotide is composed of a phosphate, a sugar, and a base. Now, the base is the A, T, G, C, or U. The phosphate's always the same, but the sugar differs between RNA and DNA. They each use a 5-carbon sugar. DNA uses deoxyribose, hence deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. RNA uses ribose, hence ribonucleic acid, or RNA. So the difference is one has a T, one has a U, one has a deoxyribose, one has ribose. Okay, another side trail for you to explore at your leisure if you really want to get into biochemistry. The transcription process starts with a transcription factor, which is a protein manufactured, of course, through transcription and translation, which is ATP dependent. Transcription factors are proteins that float around in the cell and they grab onto the DNA at specific locations upstream of a gene that needs to be transcribed. They tell the polymerase, hey, there's a gene here. Start here. And the polymerase grabs on and starts zipping down the DNA strand, and it'll make a copy of one strand of the double-stranded DNA only and go from DNA to RNA. But not only are the transcription factors proteins, therefore they had to be transcribed and translated, which requires ATP. The whole process of doing this requires ATP. Again, the A's in RNA come from ATP. So do the C's, the G's, and the U's. You need a lot of ATP to manufacture RNA. We haven't even gotten to the point where we can start building our ATP synthase motor, and already we're burning a lot of ATP. Now, in bacteria, there's a very straightforward relationship between a section of DNA and a protein. Even back before we realized what DNA was, in the 1940s, Beadle and Tatum came up with an idea called the one gene, one enzyme hypothesis.
He goes into much more detail. It's only like 15 minutes in that video. Strongly recommend people go and check that out. I will post a link to that video in the chat.
Appreciate it. Yes, I still didn't see him go all the way fully into the actual problem of the initial nucleotide formation, because there's a huge problem that without a prearranged nucleotide, with all the energy barriers in place, that if you let all those different bondings that he's talking about just kind of fall in place in a free-floating phosphate bath, as we call it, then it instantly turns into a different type of polyphosphate that's completely useless for life. It'll never turn into a nucleotide, a monophosphate nucleotide by itself.
Well, I think that's what he was saying, was without the ATP already being created, you're not being able to even create the A, C, T, and G.
It's worse than that.
Like I think that was kind of the whole point he was making, is the problem you're talking about is
the shape.
You're right. I mean, it's like you've got it's like a just additional barrier to entry of like, we don't even have the shape possible if you can't create it. It's like there's so many different levels, and then you can't activate it even if you have it. It's like, wait a minute, we need more ATP in order to activate, in order for the shape to form. It's like, hang on, so you need this to create the substance that's going to be creating the shape, but then you need more of the ATP in order to have the energy to create the shape.
Right.
I mean, you're running into so many different like interdependent paradoxes.
Right. That's what he was focusing on, was that you need the extra, batteries, the extra energy to be able to overcome the barriers. But without that first initial zipper piece, it all will instantly react into just a mess of non-chiral, non helix shaped nucleotides. It turns into this polyphosphate that will never have any structure, will never have any ability to retain information.
Exactly. Oh man, it's late. I forgot what I was about to say. Continue, guys. I had some thought and I just forgot. Literally about to open my mouth. I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh man, you get tired?
Yeah. What was I going to say? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, to me, there's just so many different like. Oh, I never remember what it was. Okay, so right now, as of this year, I read a paper earlier, like a month and a half ago probably, and right now in the origin of life research field, they're trying to come up with a precursor to ATP that could somehow explain the energy requirement being accounted for. And I'm like, okay, so even if you account for that, even if you figure out some molecule that in theory might be able to do this from an energy perspective, you still aren't explaining how, like, even the things you're coming up with do not explain the formation of RNA and DNA or protein. So it's like, congratulations, you figured out some other molecular structure that could potentially be used for energy. You haven't explained how that is remotely relevant to the formation of, like, even if you have this, you still don't account for all the other barriers to entry that you still can't avoid. Like, you still have to explain, like, how did RNA and DNA come into existence? How did proteins form? How did the ribosome form? Like, how does protein synthesis actually happen? How does all this, like, cool, you figured out a little molecule that might be able to transfer energy. Cool.
In what environment?
Congratulations.
And what's their fantasy environment that's so plausible that they never tell you that?
Well, that's actually pretty funny. I forget the exact name of it because it was like a month and a half ago I read the paper, but there was a whole section of it where they admitted that their environment was not prebiotic.
Right.
Yeah. Crystals and whatnot.
Yeah.
And even if they are able to get a precursor to ATP in some way, shape, or form, you have to get something to metabolize that.
Yep.
Well, and it requires more complicated cellular structures that you can't account for without code.
Well, it's interesting you talk about that. One of the things I've been doing some research on, I'm wanting to put together a more formal argument in favor of, but like, just when you look at, they talk about like metabolism and act like metabolism is not ridiculously complicated. And I'm talking about like a carbohydrate metabolism. Like, okay, I remember there's variations inside of different deals, but the ballpark is you need 40 different enzymes in order to metabolize a carbohydrate. But there's only 12 of the steps in that 40-step process that actually has the release of energy. The rest of them, the other 28, are literal restructuring of the carbohydrate molecule in order to facilitate the controlled release of energy that's contained within it. And if you didn't have that process, then all the energy would be released at one time, and then you would not have, or most of it, and you would have massive energy loss, overheating, all sorts of problems. And in this context, you have an extraordinarily controlled and efficient harnessing of the energy that's contained inside of the carbohydrate molecule. But you have to have 40 different stupidly complicated protein enzymes to pull this off. But only 12 of them actually have a quote-unquote energy benefit. Come on, how do you explain the ones that don't have in that particular process? Like, there is no, you can't argue that something that like changes the shape of something else, but nothing else happens for like 4 more steps. How are you going to explain? How do you explain that from natural selection? Like, you can't explain it. That makes no sense.
No, they'll just do it in a lab with a bunch of controlled conditions and intelligent agents and say that could happen on the early Earth, somewhere.
Oh, by the way, folks, it seems that Standing for Truth has finally gotten around to. He's got like 4 websites, channel, does all this stuff. Finally, just started to create a Facebook page. So he just linked it in the chat. Yeah, make sure you go over there, like, subscribe, all that stuff.
Yeah, I got a question for In His Image, man. What do you tell your professors? I mean, what's their best arguments for origin of life?
Fortunately, most people in the professional evolution class actually, at least at the biology, actually avoid origin of life. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
You've probably seen this somewhere else where the atheists just say, "Well, evolution is not part of origin. Origin of life is not part of evolution."
Yeah.
And they treat it like that at the university level as well. I haven't had to deal with any origin of life stuff. Just as a general rule of thumb, for answering questions on a test or a quiz or in a discussion board, you essentially tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
With saying the researchers say or whatever, because otherwise, I was actually shocked in one of my classes. Somebody snuck a link to the ICR website into the discussion board, and I thought she was going to get flamed. I thought she was going to get destroyed. Nobody said anything. So I mean, I don't know whether they just didn't recognize it or what, but I was like, oh. You got more guts than I do, or you don't know what that site is. That's one of the 2 options here. But I mean, generally speaking, they don't really pry into your personal beliefs, at least where I am. Now, fortunately, I have had professors who are basically very hands off. And I'm doing it distance learning, so that helps. But I know that I know other people have had really, really bad experiences with professors who were really, really into it. But fortunately, so far, the ones I've had have basically been, so long as you can answer the questions the way we want you to answer them, we don't care.
Well, I tell you one of the things that's on my bucket list. A, I already have my degree. B, I think this would be ridiculously entertaining. C, I'm self-employed, so I don't care. But I think it would be extraordinarily entertaining to go enroll in an undergrad evolutionary biology class and do it with the express purpose of, in real time, calling out a professor on there. Like,
that'd be great.
It's like, I don't care about at this point, it's like, I don't care about the grade, right? It would be for just pure entertainment of,
more than they do.
Just do a straight up, no ifs, ands, or buts about, like, challenge of the status quo. I'd be like, because we see this with, like, Dr. Dan all the time, right? Like, he doesn't have the ability to comprehend that somebody would challenge him as a professor. Like, I teach this. I know what I'm talking about. You're ignorant. Right. How dare you challenge me? Because he's used to dealing with all of the kids he teaches. He's teaching, like, freshman and sophomore college kids.
Yep.
Like, A, they don't have the knowledge. B, they're immature. C, he's in the authority position. And D, they haven't really done much enough in their life to think that they can actually challenge. I mean, there's the outliers, but very, very few are going to challenge. And then almost all of them are doing exactly what you're talking about in his image of, like, well, I have to pass this stupid class in order to get my degree and get out of here. Therefore, I'm just going to tell them what they want to hear so I can get the hell out of here and go on my next class.
Yeah, that's all it is.
And
bunch of millennials.
It's a totally different dynamic than somebody like myself going back with the express purpose of getting an F and just having some great fun annihilating a brainwashed evolutionary biologist professor. I think it'd be amazing entertainment.
Exactly.
It would be very entertaining. I mean, that'd be something I would do, except I'm paying an awful lot of money to get this degree. So, and I'd kind of like to actually have it. So,
yeah, I had the experience where I started my education, whatever you call it, after already having some professional experience. But I didn't start it, with the express intention of trying to, educate the educators necessarily. But it quickly developed into how the professors, again, being in the field already, I was letting them know, sorry, excuse me, sir, but that's something that I think that we were doing 20 years ago. This is what we're doing in the field today, kind of thing. And I found it was kind of 50-50. When I started, I was in a state university environment, And it's like half the professors were like, how you described this Dr. Dan guy or whoever. They're like, well, how dare you question my authority? How dare you question? And they wouldn't even say it's questioning the textbook or the material, because the material was often wrong, and the professors would just have to work around it. But the other half of my professors loved it. They absolutely was, they're like, heck yeah, finally, here's a student that not only can talk about stuff, but can challenge the status quo. So, they that we would have a lot of fun with that. And then that was 20 years ago. That's when I started my chemical engineering. I was in organic chemistry doing plasma physics and all kinds of stuff for microchip stuff. But 20 years ago, so here it is now. So I've worked for all these wonderful people. So I like to promote Elon Musk. He's flat said it publicly that colleges are basically useless.
Totally.
In his image, I just finished a college degree as well. I got 6-figure college debt as well right now. But Elon's right. You can learn all of this stuff for free. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
a lot
it's
of it
liberal.
you can. I mean, just going from like my own experience, like the classes I've taken, the genome evolution class, I did learn a lot, because a lot of that stuff I didn't know, and it would have been very difficult for me to pick that up on my own, because genetics is a very, very highly specialized field.
Yeah, SFT. Erica's got nothing, SFT. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I read the comment too. I just wasn't going to say anything about it.
She's got story time. Nothing but story time for abiogenesis. They got nothing.
Yeah. But the other classes that I've taken so far have kind of been, this is stuff I already know. And I actually, like my most recent lecture, the professor said something that I just shook my head and went, I know that's false. And it's not because I'm a creationist. It's because your own literature says it's false.
Exactly.
And it's just because I've read enough of the literature to know that, no, that's not actually what it says. But okay.
What do they say about some of these IT guys? I mean, they're in some high positions. They got PhDs, but so they just reject them as well?
I think the education system, Joel, I didn't hear all of what you said about the education system because my audio kind of goes in and out. But, and 20 years ago, I think it's moved a lot indoctrination now than it did even 20 years ago. I'm sure there was quite a bit of that then.
I can feel that too.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't. I don't want to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know I can speak on what you're talking about now as well.
Okay. Go ahead then. I'll let you talk. I don't want to be big. I don't want to do all the talking.
Well, yeah. So I've been doing this stuff now for 20-something years now, 25 years now, and it's gotten to a point today where we'll bring in an intern, not to see if they're not just to see if they're a good employee, that they got good character and all that good stuff, but I'm trying to say this intrepidly, to see how badly indoctrinated, how badly brainwashed they are in what you're starting to describe, this almost religious, what are you going to call it, structure, to believe things because that's what they're told. And that's what they have to mimic what they were told. We don't want that in science. We want people to not only be able to think for themselves, but to challenge the paradigm. We want people to be the exact opposite of peer review. In real science, we reject peer review. We're actually in competition with not just ourselves and our own teams, but with other companies, with other entire industries, trying to create and develop the next thing. So if all we do is agree with each other, okay, well, this is probably good because we all agree, then that's going backwards. So we look for, college students that can break that what are you going to call it, that closed system state, so to say, that can actually do science. And so, because when we do hire them, almost every graduate these days, I summarize it. It seems it takes about 2 months to a year now these days to literally deprogram them from not being able to think, essentially, and trying to be nice about it. Back in decade before most of us are born, they used to say, you go to school not to necessarily learn, but to learn how to think. Basically, that has been eroded. It's now the exact opposite. Now it seems most colleges or most people coming out of the education environment, that it's the exact opposite. They don't know how to think, but they just know how to regurgitate. They're book smart, so to say, but that we don't want book smart people. We want people to help create the next level thing, to revolutionize whatever it is we're working on in science. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the big difference between academia and something like
Professional, right? Precisely. Thank you.
something like a private company, because in academia, you're incentivized to publish, but you are not incentivized to do to improve things. Now, that's not necessarily the case in the medical academia. I want to separate them out, because medicine is very much incentivized to get things better. But just as standard academia, you're incentivized to go out to publish, but you are not incentivized to critically evaluate and to try to. Now, you're incentivized to come up with new ideas within the status quo box, if you will. But you're not incentivized to think outside the box and to go, okay, maybe this is or is not going to work, and maybe we need to come up with a better solution. You're just if there's a problem, you tinker rather than saying, okay, let's innovate, because there's no incentive to innovate. There's only incentive to, this is going to get me published.
Right.
It's a bit annoying, and this is someone who's a student, because like if I were, there's a couple of reasons for this. If I were to submit a paper to a peer-reviewed journal, and even if I didn't even mention creation, if I just submitted a paper to a peer-reviewed journal, there's a very good possibility I would be rejected simply because I don't have a PhD behind my name. Not because of anything I said that was incorrect, not because my paper was flawed in any way, just because, we don't know who this person is, he doesn't have a PhD. And I get there's value to a PhD in some fields. I'm not trying to attack education in any way, shape, or form. But we've moved the needle to a point where academia is looked at as the tower of knowledge, but academia doesn't innovate. Academia doesn't really provide knowledge. They regurgitate knowledge that the actual hands-on people have found.
Yes, absolutely. To the point to where I was describing, when I started my own education versus even today, where it's worse now, where they're literally decades behind what's actually being done in the field.
And I would imagine that the only place where the textbooks are up to date is the medical textbooks, and even that would probably be a couple of years lag time.
Which textbooks? You said medical?
Because when they write these textbooks, they just regurgitate the next issue the next year and maybe make a few minor edits or change a figure here or two here. I actually have the old edition of my evolutionary biology textbook. Still has Haeckel's embryos in it. Yeah.
But no, if you listen to the YouTube atheist talking heads, that is not true. What you just said is totally false.
Right.
I can pull up pictures.
well, that's the thing. It's like evidence doesn't, like, I can literally you can contradict all of their talking points and like show them why they're wrong in real time. And then sometimes they will literally continue down the same rabbit hole in real time. Like, hey, I just showed you exactly why you are 100% incorrect. And they'll double down on it. Or they'll like dodge in the middle of the live interaction. And then the next day they go and do a video talking about the same talking point. It's amazing to me. It gets stunning, to be honest. Like the level of denial you have to be running around in. And one of the more entertaining videos I had fun doing on the atheist Fantasyland projection complex. And it's like, this is the only way you must be, subject to that disorder. I'm joking, but like the symptoms are real, Yeah. Total and utter suspension of all rational thought in terms of the fundamentals of existence.
I wish they'd be as skeptical of evolution as they are of Christianity.
I was going to say that exactly. Thank you. That they're literally doing what they accuse Christians of doing, where Christians will just take blindly, by blind faith. They'll need to say that the Bible is true and everything needs to fit the Bible, when in reality, the Bible itself says to study, to show yourself approved, to always be ready to give an answer. So the Bible says to actually challenge what you have and to know what you're talking about, while they're the ones that are actually saying, okay, well, no, my textbook, my professor, my whatever, my peer review group says that this is true, so therefore I must blindly believe that and continue to perpetuate it. And Lena, what you talked on about how it's full of consensus. So again, in what I consider the real world of sciences, it's the exact opposite. Again, we compete. We have to try to outthink each other to be able to try to get the next project going, to get the next budget approval. And all the stuff that we do, like in space science and information science, we're buried in what's called non-disclosure agreements, where even if we do revolutionize something, we come up with the next major breakthrough, you guys aren't going to hear about it for at least 10 years. So we're gonna be trying to capitalize on it. We try to improve it because we don't care what people think. We don't care. We don't need approval. We don't need some collegiate whatever governing body of academia to say, hey, good job, here's your Nobel Prize. We never need that. We want to, because we use actual science. We actually use scientific principles. We can use the scientific method to say, yes, this is confirmable, this works, this doesn't work. And so we use those methods and methodology to say, okay, yeah, since this is working, this is going to be the next great thing. We can verify it, we can test it, we can prove it. So we'll continue to work on that to basically perfect whatever it is that we're, the new product, the new design, the new concept that we're trying to develop. We don't need some other human to give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, so that we'll not only continue to improve it, like I'm saying, but also, and some people will argue whether this is a negative or not to be able to capitalize on it. But I mean, that's how businesses work. That's how you hire these scientists, is you get this big, nice, giant glob of money so that you can make the risks, so you can do what the colleges can't do, so you can actually innovate, like Elon Musk again. He's constantly talking about how he's surprised. He never thought in his wildest dreams that he'd be this successful as he is. He's always thinking his ideas are the next failure, So he's the capital that he maintains. It's to make sure that when and if he does fail, he doesn't destroy all of his efforts. And that's the balance you have to make in the real world.
One caveat I will throw out is there is some competition in academia for some things, mostly government grants.
Mm-hmm.
There is pretty cutthroat competition for those. But again, this is not money that the colleges have to earn through their projects. And to a certain extent they do, because if their projects don't do well, then they have to. Then they aren't going to get as many grants. But it's more. If you write a good grant proposal, you probably will get a grant, most likely, depending on what you're studying. If you say you're going to study scientific creationism, yeah, you aren't getting a grant. But if you are going to study, the evolution of deer antlers or something like that, and you write a convincing proposal, you will probably get your grant, most likely. Now, you don't always get it, but usually you get, government grant or a nonprofit grant. You sometimes get those. But the incentive is there, but the incentive is very much more about survival in academia rather than bettering yourself and bettering the scientific community.
Right. Science itself. Right.
Right. The incentive is not, I want to do, and there are, and I want to be careful. I won't want to characterize every scientist this way, because there are a lot of scientists who are very interested in the actual science and are very interested in, I want to do this to better my field. So I don't want to characterize everybody, but the incentive is that, hey, I want to move myself up. I want to become, chair of my department or dean of my department. I want to get tenure. And so on, and then you get to a point where a lot of people, that's their only motivation. It's no longer about, hey,
Right.
how good is my science? It's where's my next paper coming from?
Where's my next ladder, rung up the ladder? And that's so I've had that experience as well. So even the federal grant stuff you're talking about, the research circuit, that's also, to my mind, it's kind of fraud, because the politicians that make those budget items, they're not so much genuinely caring about trying to innovate or create some new scientific breakthrough. They're allocating X amount of billions of dollars and saying, here, who can convince us to give them this static amount of money, basically. And again, whenever I was starting my Chem E degree, and just I was already just being in the field, so I was able to ask these questions to my professors to kind of get out of that paradigm that they themselves were stuck in, that what we would call it, that mental trap. They were, again, the professors that wanted, like you just described, that wanted to not necessarily appeal to whatever other academic authority or whatever position. They actually wanted to improve their field. We're all excited. They're like, hey, Joel, hey, we've got this research grant doing this. We got this federal, and I was starting to get offers from other colleges outside of where I was at, to join all these supposedly wonderful federal grant, all these projects out there across the country. And I was like, wow, I was in my mid-20s. I was all surprised, and I guess I was just trying not to be flattered or whatever. But I started looking at these proposals that they were all super excited for me to try to get into, and I was like, I'm sorry, but this is all old school tech. This is stuff that I would have to go backwards with what I'm doing in my real job. You know what I mean? And so I kind of broke their heart. I couldn't, I got out of chemical engineering because it was so, the academia side of it was so backwards. I mean, which was terrible, because the school, it looks, cutting edge. You start it, and they're talking about all this wonderful stuff and advances in lithography and all the stuff in microtechnology, but it's ancient in the real world. In the real world, there's stuff 10, 20 years, that down the road that make that we know in public. I don't know. That's a whole other story. I apologize. We need to talk about this more in this image. I love talking about this with you.
No, it's great stuff to talk about. So we got somebody just jumped in. Tommy, what's going on, man? Appreciate you joining the stream. How you doing tonight?
Doing well, gentlemen. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, coming through.
Good. I'm honored to be here, and I want to say I'm new to you, gentlemen, especially you, LPP, and you, Joel, but you sure hold my respect. I was very pleased to behold how you guys confronted Smokey and Ryan and our neighbor Nicholas the other night. Very honorable, and you hold my respect. And anyway, that's all I wanted to say. And congratulations for your 900 subs, also.
Oh, thanks, Tommy. I appreciate it. It's I'm not gonna go into crazy detail and all that stuff, but I mean, yeah, to me, we gotta really focus on, my purpose of being on YouTube is to be hyper targeted at a very specific foundational component in modern atheism. And in my opinion, even though the majority of the atheists, at least the ones on YouTube, will claim that evolution is not, and abiogenesis are not fundamental components to their belief in being, or to them being atheists. But then they use it all the time to explain away the need for God to exist. And then and they'll do it with strong fervor, and then at the same time flip and be like, well, this doesn't actually have anything to do with why I'm an atheist. It's like, well, either it does or it doesn't. So many of them in their why I became an atheist videos, it's, oh, well, I realized that all this stuff about God creating the universe is complete malarkey, and nobody can answer my questions. Therefore, I went and did research online, and I started talking with all these other atheists, and they explained to me why all these Christians are just nuts, and now they have transformed into hardcore anti-theist atheists. And then we have a lot of times, I'm talking about churches especially, they run around acting like this stuff isn't relevant, or they comply to theistic evolution, some of these different, compromise positions. And then they wonder why they're not having any positive outcome in, directly addressing not necessarily that big of a, let's get real. The atheists in general aren't that big, and the new atheists on YouTube aren't that big of a number, but they are their purpose is to be as loud as possible. And they're
bombastic even, yeah.
And take advantage of the modern technology that we have, and Facebook and YouTube and Discord and all these different things. And that one individual is being able to potentially influence who knows how many people. That person might not become a loud and proud atheist who's running around trying to convince other people, but they might lose their faith, or they might have been on the path to faith and then they've done a complete 180, or they've just shifted, or they stopped. And to me, it's like, if we don't address that and give no quarter, the field is ours. All of the things we've been discussing tonight, and people talk about in our streams and our debates and everything, like, why anybody operates from the position that we do not have, like, the ball is not in our court. We are on the high ground, like, to mix metaphors, like we're on the hill. They act like and try to project that we're the ones that are scraping to try and have any credence to our position. It's like, no, everything about all of your arguments are collapsing around you, and the evidence is in. And even atheist scientists are having to, academics are having to concede that huge portions of it are flawed, even if they run the risk professionally, like we've been talking about tonight. Some of them, the ones that are successful, are coming in, they're like, you know what? I'm successful. I've got a bunch of awards. I'm going to retire soon. Just go screw you guys. This is bullshit. Let's go find. Let's get real. Anyway, enough of my long-winded tangent there. I appreciate you very much, man. That's like I said, that's a big reason I do. I'm doing what I do. It's like somebody's got to. And
all right, there it is. And it is a service to our community and to the body of Christ at large. Thank you, Joel, and thank you, LPP. I mean that. Just wanted to duck in and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, no, really, really, really appreciate it, because it does get hard, to fight among ourselves like that. It's to try to figure out how to just get people to want to just be peaceful and talk about things, legitimately. And I know there's a lot of people behind the scenes, like you're showing, that support, trying to just be Christ-like. And you don't see it often enough, I guess, and so it gets hard. So I really appreciate you giving me that encouragement.
I like seeing you have fun. I know that. It looks like you're having fun a lot. So you guys take care. God bless you. Keep up.
You as well.
Bye.
Appreciate it, Tommy. Welcome back anytime, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you got wind, John. Antangulo was going to try to help kind of end some of that madness, as you would probably put it, earlier tonight as well. And I linked him the part where you tried to help on Praise's channel the other night, and it's just, I don't know, anxious. It's I don't want to say it's a stress, but I'm anxious for it to go away.
Yeah,
it's in the Lord's hands as far as I'm concerned, but we don't have to talk about it, but I just want to let you know.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know it's Angela wanting to address it as well. It
looks like he ended up not doing it tonight, so which is fine.
Yeah, a lot of controversy. I don't know. I'm sure the debate tomorrow night between Praise and Smokey will be interesting.
Yes.
I'm debating on whether or not I'm going to do an after show. I'm going to help SFT mod the debate. I'm intrigued to see how that goes.
There'll be some sparks for sure. Iron sharpens iron, right?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I have to. I've told Praise this, and I don't agree with his position. I think he's kind of going to a weird some of the mental. I do think he's taking some mental gymnastics in a few positions to like come to the conclusions he's coming with. For sure, but that's a whole that's a whole other doctrinal conversation.
No, it's a great conversation. I think there's lots of things to kind of challenge it all on, and I believe that that's what the Lord wants. He doesn't want us to necessarily subscribe to any one set of whatever, and to have reason, to say, okay, well, if this says this, then how does that make sense with this? So that when we do speak to, especially non-believers, not just atheists, but people that want to know, that we can make it make sense to others. You know what I mean? Never want to rely on just believe it just because it says so. No. Bible says to give reason for your faith, for your belief. Explain it. Make it make sense. Yep. Use science. God made science. Use it.
Lena was saying, says John had a perfect description of COVID madness. I honestly, I do, in not just in context of what we're talking about right now, but so many different things I've been observing in society in general. But I mean, especially on YouTube and such, I'm like, it's official. COVID-19 madness exists. It's a real thing. And I think more weird crap is happening from the mental stress, portion of all this stuff going on with COVID than the actual virus itself. I mean, there's just no way at this point, especially for the folks. I mean, like George, for example, he's been on for all intents and purposes, house arrest and not allowed to go more than 5 kilometers from his house for the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I mean, I would go nuts in that scenario. And of course, I mean, George, he's retired and he's got a nice house and stuff. So he's not living in a little small apartment, right? So I could see. I mean, he's chilling, on his nice back deck, drinking a whiskey and that kind of stuff. He's doing okay. But you think about that for all the folks, especially in the urban environments, densely populated urban environments, are living in a studio apartment that's 300 square feet, and they can't leave.
That's a bedroom.
People don't think about what kind of impact that would actually have. Oh, it's like this for months, and you're not being able to leave and go out and do stuff. I mean, all those videos where they were arresting people in New York and Boston and stuff for sitting on their front porch of their redstone house. Hey, you're arresting somebody for sitting on their porch.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Or playing in their own backyard, right?
Right. You don't think this is going to have massive negative outcomes on people's psyche? Yes, it will. And if you think otherwise, you're an idiot. I mean,
suicides are up 200%.
Yeah. I remember seeing, this was back in May. I remember seeing a report from some doctors that were super pissed. And they're like, we have now dealt with more attempted suicides in from January to May than we usually do in an entire year. I mean,
I've noticed kind of another interesting phenomenon on that topic, but I'll let you finish, of course.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So there's the obvious, I guess, for lack of a better word, dichotomy between humans, introverts versus extroverts. So, even this new job that I'm in, this team, it's relatively small, I guess, 20 plus 20, 30 size people team. And I'm already noticing, of course, the personality differences. So the managerial positions, the upper management guys, and some of the more customer focused side of people, the QA ladies and so the obvious extroverts, they're right now the company has I think a lot of most other companies they have a rolling whatever policy where you can volunteer to come into the office or not kind of thing. And so the more extrovert types, they're doing that. So, but again, there's 20 something people in the one team that I'm in, this one little office, and there's been days where it's just been 2 people. There was I think yesterday I was the only one in the whole office. All the introverts, they're loving it. They're doing the remote stuff. We're doing all the we got the Teams meetings and all the whatever Zoom calls and whatever other app that was the other day that I never even heard of before. where we'll have hundreds of people in a teleconference session, and they laugh it up. It's kind of like a party almost online through your computer. But I think for there's another side of it that loves this. You know what I mean? They prefer not to come into the office. They're thriving finally being at home and having that nice little controlled environment. They just feel more productive, and you can order in. You can get people to drive food to your home for you.
Yeah, well, I think the soy boys are also loving it. Not having to actually go out and have any kind of alpha status is beneficial to them. Man, I tell you what, my opponent the other night on the voter fraud thing, wow, that guy.
The what prob thing?
So, over on Modern Day Debate last night. Was it last night? My days are blurring. Yeah. I debated this Vladim guy on whether or not there was voter fraud in the election. Wow. Talk about he even called himself a very high level soy boy.
What is a soy boy? I'm sorry, I'm not hip.
For all intents and purposes, a soy boy is somebody who's very proud of the fact that they're a beta. It makes no sense. I don't get it. It stems from all the I'm only going to drink soy milk in my latte. That's where it kind of stems from. But now it's kind of an insult towards you're a beta is what it implies. And it's crazy to me. Like yet another one. And why you would... I don't know. I don't expect every man to be like some crazy testosterone-ridden alpha, but the fact that people are becoming extraordinarily proud of the fact that they're the antithesis, that's weird.
It's a social thing. It's how they feel. That's how they feel like they gain acceptance in a certain group that they want to appeal to.
Well, true, but here's the thing, though. Women still, not all, but obviously, but the majority of women are still attracted to, maybe not like ridiculous, all women don't want the ridiculous alpha male, but there's been studies on this, most women do not want a beta. This is just a fact. It's very bizarre.
Well, it's not quite so bizarre when you consider that society as a whole has basically mocked men for the past 5 decades.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's been a very conscious effort to achieve that objective that you're referring to. The mocking. There's been a very coordinated effort, I think, between Hollywood, academia, and government to remove testosterone from the equation in order to achieve their objectives.
I don't want to go down too far down the conspiracy rabbit trail there, but Hollywood definitely has been very, shall we say, critical of men, and they've been portrayed in the worst possible light. In just about every, television show, the man is the butt of all the jokes, and he's incompetent, can't do anything by himself, and that sort of portrayal. I don't watch a whole lot of television, so I don't know all this stuff, but I see enough to look at it and go, this isn't the way it was intended to be. And I'm not. I think LPP probably would put me down as something of a soy boy if you were to see me, not because I am, but because I'm a nerd. I'm a guy who reads scientific papers all day and feels very comfortable doing that. So I'm not necessarily going down the whole alpha beta thing, but I will say that I think if society would be a lot better off if men would stand up and be men and actually fight for things that matter and fight for things that are important and protect women and children and do the things that God designed them to do.
Well, no, I don't agree with you. I don't mean that. That's why I kept making the distinction of I don't necessarily, when I say when I'm saying alpha versus beta and soy boy and such, I don't necessarily mean you've got to be the, 1980s version of Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's not what I'm referring to. I think of that much more in context of the mental side of it. Like, just because you like to read, I read scientific papers all the time too, and doesn't, I mean in context of willingness to have confrontation when necessary. And I don't mean that from a violence perspective either. Like, we're not talking about like going out and throwing punches and all that kind of, that's not what I mean. I mean from being willing to challenge the status quo.
Right.
And not just comply and be what you were referring to in terms of the TV character, the one that's just, complicit and will do what they're told and whatnot. Right. It's like, no, sorry, I'm not just going to accept that what you tell me is what I have to do. Like, and what I find very fascinating about that, and what we're talking about right now, is the number of people who the entire premise of, I'm speaking of specifically in context of, all people, but men especially, like, they operate from this perspective that why would you challenge what authority says? That's literally how they operate and talk.
And that goes
why would you question what you're told to believe? Like, I don't know, because that's how it's been since the dawn of time up until the last century. Like, that was a standard deal. Like, that was part of how any kind of, positive change to society ever happened, was being able to challenge the status quo. And do you not recognize that you are the people I'm referring to right now, you call yourself a progressive. You claim that you are challenging the status quo. However, you are literally advocating for not allowing people to challenge the status quo. Like, do you not comprehend how stupid your position is? It blows the mind.
Well, John, that ties directly right back into that conversation we were having earlier about academia versus professional sciences. We're not looking for Arnold Schwarzeneggers or Stallones, like you said, but we do want people that can buck the system, that can think outside the box, as they say. And in his image, I think John's wanting to kind of close soon, probably still. You were typing about it earlier. But this is the first time I've met you tonight, and you seem like a very fascinating individual, and I'd love to talk with you more sometime. I'm very curious what your kind of your goal, your end game is, so to say, in the biology fields you're getting into.
Okay, yeah, sure. Be happy to talk to you anytime. I missed most of what you guys said because StreamYard was going in and out for me, but I'd be happy to chat with you anytime. I'm not entirely sure how the whole contact thing works. I think I have a website. You can get a hold of me there. I don't want to advertise it though, unless LPP is okay with that. But
Orman, you can put it in private chat.
Happy to chat. I am in grad school full time, so and working, so timing limiting, but I'm happy to talk. So.
Well, I did subscribe to your YouTube channel, so I'll try to listen to you there. But
I'm in trouble finding it.
Well, I guess you on in his image. Tell us a little about your channel and what you're trying to do.
Okay, sure. I am basically what I've been doing for the past couple of years with a blog, which is inhisimage.blog, is I've been putting out 3 articles a week on various topics related to creation and or biblical authority. I've all kinds of different stuff. A lot of it is genetics or biology based, because that's my preference, but there is some other stuff on other topics as well. I do also do a weekly podcast, which goes out on audio and video, and that goes out on my YouTube channel, which is just in his image. You want to make sure we're finding it on YouTube. I think Standing for Truth linked to it in the chat a little while ago, or at least mentioned it. I don't know if he linked to it or not, but at any rate, I shouldn't be too hard to find. Basically, I'm just standing for the truth of the Bible, starting from the very first verse, that we are all made in the image of God. We don't come from monkeys, and we never were monkeys. And God made the earth in 6 literal 24-hour days. Give or 6,000 years ago, give or take a plus minus figure. So, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Okay, I found your channel.
So in other words, you're not an academic. Thank God. You actually want to learn and solve science, it sounds like.
Okay, right. So I'm putting a link to In His Image channel in the live chat right now. All right, go ahead, man.
Man, you're right, Joel. A lot of it is very science heavy. I do try to get into stuff that other people don't talk about because, I mean, let's just be real here. Answers in Genesis, Creation Ministries International, ICR, they do a really good job of covering a lot of the basic stuff. So I try to get into stuff where there's questions, where there are things that are a little bit more complicated, and I try to bring it down to a level where most people can sit down and go, okay, I can digest this and at least get something out of it. I may not get everything, but at least be able to get some stuff out of it.
Awesome. Thank you. Love to learn. Anxious to learn. I started to try when I started kind of frequenting these YouTube channels with John and others about maybe a month or two ago. I was getting excited to try to see where I could maybe contribute, on an information science level and maybe a 3D programming level. But talking with Sal and some others, the efforts that have already been done in that department seem so overwhelming. I started finding corporate supercomputer level, efforts of trying to model some of these things that it kind of make me take a step back and just I don't know where I could help contribute, but I'd love to be able to somehow.
Well, we'll definitely get in touch, man. Definitely get in touch. And there's contact information on my website. You can easily get a hold of me. Cool. I'm more than happy to email back and forth or whatever, and happy to work with people. I've had guests on my show before for podcasting and whatnot, so happy to work with people, happy to collaborate, all that stuff. So
very cool. As a matter of fact, Dr. Carter's in a chat room, chat side. We were talking about trying to do something in emails at least, but like you were saying, I just finished a master's degree earlier this year, and I'm doing a post-grad certificate right now, still working full time, and it's just not easy. It's so hard to. I really.
Well, of course, I will tell you guys something. One of the things I'm actually working on, I'm starting to put together the logic, is I'm strongly considering the need for a publicly funded group, specifically in bringing folks like what we're talking about together, all in place, but doing it not from a traditional nonprofit perspective, but do it more in the context of bringing together great minds and then taking advantage of like new equity crowdfunding laws and such. They would enable like just the average person to fund research and things of that nature on a public funding level. And because I really think if we go in, like when you consider what startups do to raise capital to be able to achieve new objectives and such, you have to go out and find specific demographics, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we have hyper-targeted demographic conglomerates, if you will, that yes, they will fund different, the parent groups, the Southern Baptists and all Methodists and all that stuff will fund and back different groups like a CMI and IRC and all the different ones. But there's not public capital raise and funding coming from, the average person that's going directly towards research. And that's happening on the venture capitalist level, right? And all those different pieces in order to, they want to find some, next $1 billion concept. But a lot of things that we were talking about in relation to funding of research that doesn't necessarily fit with the status quo, with the dramatic reductions in capital requirements for research. I started looking into, a family member of mine used to be over the head of the financial head of a pretty sizable genetics research lab. And I was asking her like what the kind of costs were and stuff. And she was breaking it down for me. I was researching it. And it's like, wow, I'm thinking about from a business perspective, like some of this stuff is not that much. Like you don't actually have to have that much money to operate this thing. And anyways, it was kind of intriguing to me of like, I need to start looking into figuring out ways to leverage things like the community that we're creating here, like the level of potential influence we could have to get in front of people to, crowdfund the capital. It's no longer this, as massive a barrier to entry as it once was.
That's definitely something that's interesting. I do want to clarify one tiny portion of what you said. The big three when it comes to creationist organizations. So far as I know, again, I don't know all their sources of funding, but they get nothing from the denominations. The denomination, all of their money comes in through private donors. They're not associated with any of the denominations, and realistically, almost all the denominations are compromised on creation anyway. They won't take a position on it. So they won't back. Now, sometimes individual pastors within the denominations will definitely support them. But the denominations as a whole won't do it. Even the Southern Baptists won't do it.
Well, no, see, I wasn't necessarily. I agree with you on that completely. I was more saying from a marketing perspective.
No, I get where you were going. I just want to clarify that.
No. Trust me, I totally get what you're saying there. It's kind of interesting. I actually live in Nashville, which is called the Buckle of the Bible Belt. We've got a whole boatload of like major, let's just say, lots of headquarters of different denominations. Like, there's a bunch of stuff here, and the like Lifeway's headquarters is here, and a bunch of their some big time players. And it's right. You're right. It's interesting how you would think the groups that you would think would be the most likely to counter a lot of these points are the ones that are not taking action. They're compromised. It's a great point. Yeah, it really pisses me off in the context when you look at the amount of capital that they have access to. And I gotta say this also in context of some of the different groups. So I'm not going to name names, but I've looked at their donor list, like from their disclosures, and I'm like, hang on, you guys had $15 million last year. You had 22 million. You had 59. You had 67. You're like, I'm being literal in the numbers, not figurative. And I'm like, how in the hell, with that level of capital, is there not massive levels of direct marketing campaigns going on to share the truth? Like, you don't have to have that much capital in the modern era to be able to be doing very proactive marketing. And proactive versus reactive, paid versus earned, all that kind of stuff. Like, this is not like, you don't have to have gigantic sums of money to have pretty aggressive influence and growth, and in terms of influence. And I'm like, how do you, like, I know what I could do with $100,000. You've got 15 million. There's 75 employees. Like, where's the money going? Like, what's being done with this capital? It kind of, no, I'm not suggesting they're like out wasting it and stuff and like not using it for good purposes and stuff. I just mean, like, if the real objective should be reaching as many people as possible, why is it obvious that some of the very small line items on the budget are marketing? I guess the point I'm making. It's like, I think it needs to be like a mental shift. And I think some of it stems from a lot of the folks involved in a lot of these organizations are either current or former like academic types. And although I think a lot of them aren't thinking about it from the business marketing perspective, I guess. Like, that's not the way their brain works. And going down that path, it's not something that really computes with them. But I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, folks. It is almost 1:15. My time. I gotta get up. I have not been getting enough sleep this past couple days, and I don't want to feel like a drunk person tomorrow from sleep deprivation. So, appreciate everybody joining us. Thanks so much for everybody that's helped help me make it to 900 subs, and hopefully make it to 1,000 soon. Be awesome, and continue to grow, fight more battles, and as a collective, we can all share knowledge, bring wisdom, ideas, and new strategies into the arena. And to, in my opinion, we have to remember that we are facing off against a formidable enemy, and we should treat some of them as enemy combatants, others as civilians, others as potential allies, and others as people who just need to be utterly annihilated. Intellectually, obviously, not physically. I'm not proposing violence, just mental destruction, because they are actively convincing people to sacrifice their own eternal existence in exchange for ego and suspension of rational thought. So keep that in mind, everybody. And as you go and do research for yourself, if you're expanding your own mind, if you're somebody who is still on the fence and trying to decide which way is the correct decision for you, as always, I love to say, make sure that the conclusions that you reach are the ones that are logical, plausible, and probable. And before we wrap up, in his image, and Joel, you guys have any last things you want to say before we call it a night?
I was thinking how wonderful that video you sent me from Rob Carter calls it the spaghettification of irreducible complexity. I just saw that subtitle. I want to thank you again for showing that, and I'd love to. Oh, and are we going to have a 1,000 sub party as well?
Oh yeah, well, we hit 1,000 subs, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was great meeting you again in his image, and hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're awesome. I appreciate you. Everybody, don't forget, I put in his image channel link in the chat. Make sure you click on that. And if you post something in chat real quick, I'll make you a mod. So next time you're in, you can post links to stuff.
All right, thanks.
You guys have a good night.
Right on, folks. All right, have a good one.